All right, set review part 2. Today we're covering the red, black, green, and blue commons and uncommons in this set. It's still incredibly dense. It's still fantastic. It plays really well. So very quickly, we're going to talk a little bit more about backup today. Backup says you put a counter on something, and it gains the following ability. They tend to be keyword abilities or simpler things that you think might be keyword abilities. Blighted Burgeoning is an incubate card. Incubate is a second mechanic. Everything does a little bit of incubating, but black and green are a little bit better. Battles are the defining thing in the format. It's going to be easy to talk about battles with a fresh battle in front of us. In fact, we will get to this one pretty quickly, and we'll talk about the scaling. These are the stats. I'll be referring back to them. If you want a full explanation of all of them and how I got them, go ahead and watch yesterday's video. And here is the removal stats. This is what kills what in the format. Very useful on how we run through things. The thing that I want to talk about most while we're here today is the rhythm of the set. So we'll come back a little bit later to discuss exactly what this means and everything that why this is important. But there is a rhythm to this set, and that's because there's a delay on the incubated triggers, on the tokens that you're making. There's a delay on the battles when you flip them. There's cards that transform, and then there's engines that build value. And there's lots and lots and lots of mana sinks, just good ways to spend your mana. There's a rhythm to everything that you're doing in this set. Tempo is a really direct way to affect the rhythm, but when you can find what you're trying to do and how it meshes with what your opponent's trying to do, and then disrupt them, you're going to win. And we'll talk a lot about how we get there. Yeah, let's do that, then that, and make this a little bit more visible. All right, looks like we had a few options. It is. That's a good point, Quebec. Especially because there are cards that will grant additional abilities. All right, so the explanation of the system that I use, as opposed to most people who make content, I consider the old way to grade cards a little bit outdated. I use a scale of 1 to 10. So a 1 is never play me. That would be an F on a lot of traditional content creator scales. A 2 is you should do your best not to play a card. A 3 is filler. You're going to end up with a lot of them. You want to try and upgrade as much of the filler as possible. A 4 is a card that's above average. A 5 is a strong card. A 6 is a card that you'll always play in that color. And a 7 is a reason to play that color. That's a rare, a bomb, something you open in pack 1 and think, I'm going to force this. An 8 is a card that you have to make fit. A 9 is a card you'll always play. And a 10 is a card that wins the game. We'll talk a lot about Convoke today, Jinx. Rather than just give everything a number, because all cards are powerful and contextual now in pretty much every set, I give cards a floor value, which is the worst that a card will be, a ceiling value, and then the amount of effort it takes to bridge that gap, whether that's gameplay or deck building or sideboarding. Hey, Troy, how's it going? Okay. Let's see here. I don't remember what all of you requested, so let's just continue in color order. So we did white last. White's pretty interesting. Whatever this is what we're going to do, and that is blue. All right, so blue is counters. Blue does a lot in this format. It's very interesting and very complex. So there are counter spells. Counter spells are much better in this format than they've been in others because you can hold up mana to counter a spell, and then when your opponent doesn't play a spell, which is often a great way to deal with a counter spell, you can flip an incubate token. There's lots of 1-drops in blue, and you want those 1-drops because they give you tempo, and normally when you play a 1-drop in blue, you're giving up a card to not get a lot of value, but you can push in a lot of damage while you counter spells or bounce spells or spend your mana to answer their threat every turn. In blue, your 1-drops also let you convoke cards. We'll be talking a lot about convoke in relation to blue. There's a lot of really cool cards. The cards are harder to work with overall, but they're not weaker. The blue-black archetype is dual mill, so you will be... That's not the right dual. Dual mill. So you mill both of you, and then you take cards from either graveyard or care about the number of cards in either graveyard. Blue-green is not necessarily transform, it's double-sided cards. You care about double-sided cards. Blue-white is knights and tempo. Blue-red is convoke. I know, it's because you look at them power-wise and you think they should be at sorcery speed. But no, they flip it into speed. All right, so up first we have Artistic Refusal. I love this card. So this is 6 mana is a lot to counter a spell, and it's a lot to draw a card. But at the end of the day, you need the good convoke cards are instant. The bad convoke cards are things that you have to play at sorcery speed. Because if you have to tap all of your creatures to aid you casting a spell on your turn, then that's incredibly bad. Because in other formats with convoke is a returning mechanic. Your creatures help you pay for the spell. You would tap all your creatures to convoke a spell, and the cost you paid for tapping 8 creatures to play something massive is your opponent gets to hit you. You pay life. Well, in this, you pay cards, because if you tap 4 creatures to cast a big invoke spell, a convoke spell, then your opponent gets to play a battle and attack it while your shield's down. So blue control decks, they want to leave their creatures up and convoke spells on the opponent's turn. And Artistic Refusal is a really good example of that. You will have a lot of games where you pass the turn and then your opponent will cast a spell and you get to... This card is not quite a Sublime Epiphany, but countering a spell and drawing 2 cards and then discarding something unhelpful like a land is going to be feeling really good. You do need this to be in a pretty dedicated convoke deck. So I gave it a total score of 4 with a floor of 2 because that's when it's not in a convoke deck, and a ceiling of 6 because there are a lot of ways to make a lot of tokens, which make casting this feel really strong, especially when you're countering something that might otherwise blow you out, something that gives everything -1/-1. It is like Dismiss, Springbok. Hey Kaiser, how's it going? We're doing a set review, which means that I will be answering questions after talking about each card and addressing all of you each card. But yes, if you have 6 creatures, this card will feel like Dismiss. Dismiss is actually really apt because you're probably never going to have 6 creatures for Artistic Refusal. What's a lot more likely is you have 3 creatures and 3 lands that you wanted to leave back for a different reason. Or maybe you have 2 creatures because there's a few cards that make 2/1/1s, and then an Incubate token and 4 mana up, and your opponent casts a spell and you're like, okay, I'm gonna flip my Incubate token, putting a 3/3 on the board, convoke the Artistic Refusal, counter your spell, draw 2 cards, pitch a land, untap and kill you. Or play a battle and attack that battle for 5. I really like this card. A lot of content creators do not. But I think it's great. There's a pretty wide disparity between how bad the card can be and how good the card can be, but it's a medium effort because blue is pretty good at making convokers. Yes, but you don't need as many as you'd think. If you have 2, if you're paying 4 mana for this spell, you're happy. And sometimes in the late game, you'll just have 6 untapped lands, and that's okay too. Especially if they're letting you build up your creatures so they can board wipe you. And if you missed the beginning, counterspells are good in this format. Up next is Assimilate Essence. So you may recognize Assimilate Essence from Scatter Ray. So we saw Scatter Ray in the Brothers War, which was 2 mana, counter a creature or artifact unless they paid 4. That card was kind of bad because you weren't always able to hold up mana. I like this card because if you play this on turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, you're going to counter something that matters. You're going to counter their 2-drop, their 3-drop, their 4-drop, and often this kind of card will do much worse as the game goes on, because if you're in the mid game and you're holding up mana for this card, that means you didn't develop your board in a meaningful way. And if you're in the late game, your opponent might just be able to cast a 4-drop and pay 4 mana. Well, with Assimilate Essence, you have that early game interaction. You get to counter the spells when they matter. In the mid game, you're holding up mana for an Incubate token. So you do want this in an Incubate deck if you can have it. And in the late game, your opponent is either going to play an 8 mana creature or battle, and you can counter it outright and you'll be very happy. Or they're going to play a cheaper creature and you can just essentially cycle this. You turn it into a 2/2. And a 4 mana 2/2 at instant speed is not ideal, but it's better than this being a dead card in the late game, which these Mana Leak style spells often are. The buyout is not great on Assimilate Essence, but like you still play this card. Blue plays much more like blue would play in Constructed in this set. than we've seen in a long time. I kind of missed it. I didn't realize how much I missed this style of play. Oops, the chat isn't up. I'm so sorry. All right, now the chat overlay is up, and now everybody can see all the clever things you say. If anybody disagrees outright with a ranking for real reasons, Temno, not because they are bigoted against random colors, if anybody outright disagrees with the rating, tell me. I will change the rating right here if you can convince me that it should be different. So I gave this a floor of 2 because it will not always be great. But if you build your deck right, it's not that hard to get this to play near its ceiling of 4, where it's just a fine removal spell. It's also important, battles and a lot of the creatures in this set do a lot when they come into play. We saw a ton yesterday, like there's a 4-mana 2/2 that makes a 2/2. If you kill that after it comes down, they still have a 2/2 that's relevant. If you don't counter, there are battles that just kill creatures. Being able to counter those is important, because if you let them come down, answering them after that is going to be too late. They're a little bit like sagas. Countering them is valuable. All right. Up next, we have Astral Wingspan. This is a revisit. We will be back for this one. I like it a lot. This is one of the few sorcery speed convoke cards that I like, because either you're convoking this for a big discount, which means that so there's a card that makes 2/1/1s for 2 mana. That means that you can play this on turn 3, draw a card, and you've got a 3/3 flying threat. But if you just pay 5 mana to put this on your 4/4, and then they play a kill spell, then you will be out-tempoed. And if they kill your creature in response, then you're going to be really upset. But there's a lot of battles that you will put down before this, and then you'll be able to play this to just get a free battle and draw a card. So this is a high risk, high reward kind of card. We're going to revisit it. It may turn out to be a little worse than we think, but I think it's solid. I miss Flight of Fancy, Springbok. Flight of Fancy is a real risk reward card. You get one in this set, Temno. It's called Stoke the Flames. All right, up next, Captive Weird. This card is so well designed and cool. So a 1-mana 1/3. This is a card that in the past would have been a 1-mana 0/3, but at 1-mana 1/3, it actually meaningfully blocks a lot of the 1 and 2 drop creatures. It blocks a lot of 2/1s, and it'll even trade with a 3/1, and you won't be too upset. But 1-drops in blue are better than they are in other colors because of Convoke. Because if you go this card and then make 2/1/1s, well, you can cast this card on turn 3. You can cast an Artistic Refusal on turn 3 to dismiss your opponent's 3-drop. And it doesn't feel terrible. It doesn't feel like you wasted a whole time. It's some setup, it's some work, but it's pretty good. You usually won't transform this card until a little bit later. Here's the other side of it. Complete a conjure. Oh, and for the flip cards, there's a few in every color, and there's one of these transform cards in every pack. And I'll just do them. They always have the same rating. They're rated together, but this way you can see both of them. The Completed Conjure essentially reads as a 3/3 that draws a card. So taken all together, this is a 1-mana 1/3 that blocks early, convokes, and then turns into a relevant body that also draws you a card. Hey Ben, next, how's it going? It's Kavu Climber in stages, Springbok. It's Kavu Climber, but you get a 1-drop that lets you convoke first. This card is fantastic. This is one of the better flip cards. Hey Ben, how you doing? Let me know if you have any questions. I'll be taking any questions and comments after I talk about each card. There is a flip card in every pack. There's the pack construction is wild. There's every pack has a 50% chance of having a common dual land or a basic land, a flip card like this, a battle. So packs can have up to 3 rares and up to, I think, 6 uncommons. And then there's universes beyond stuff, like the companions. So it's a little wild. Pack construction is going to be hard to parse, but very interesting. All right, up next, we have changed the equation. Oh, it's important to note, you can pay 2 life or a red mana here. So this isn't necessarily a blue-red card. You can play this in a mono-blue deck, and that 2 life is a lot less relevant when you have a 1/3 defender on turn 1, because you have managed to prevent a lot of damage with that card. Change the equation. This is one of the blue. This is the blue hate card. Hey Alex Canada, thanks for the follow. How you doing? Let me know if you have any questions. I'll answer them after the spiel for each card. All right, change the equation is one of the hate cards. This is one of the worst ones because you will not have a good time to play this. So if this card is in your opening hand and your opponent doesn't play a spell with mana value 2 or less for you to counter, you're not going to want to hold this up for the rest of the game, and you may get a combat trigger later, and that's pretty bad. If your opponent is red or green, even if they have red or green spells just in their deck, the card's fine. So this is truly a sideboard card. Unlike the other hate spells, you don't want to main deck this unless you want this to be a sideboard card, but it's pretty good if you can bring it in against red or green decks. Otherwise, don't worry about it. Yes, exactly. So that's a good point, Springbok. So this is ranked. I gave it a 2, even though it's almost always going to be a 1, and in your sideboard is going to be a 4. So it averages out to be a 2, which is not a card you want to pick very high. But like if you don't need anything out of the pack, grab it, put it in your sideboard. You'll be pretty happy to have access to it in one of your matches over the course of the event. But yeah, that is how my rating system works. It's a 1 normally, a 4 out of the sideboard, and it averages out to be a 2 with a lot of effort because it's only good against 33% of the decks. It's essentially useless in best of 1, Springbok. That's exactly right. So yes, and what's going to happen a lot, Jinx, is your opponent will, like, you don't necessarily bring this in against a red-green deck. You bring this in against a green-white deck, and then you'll be able to counter a big green spell or a white ossification or a white pump spell. And there are white equivalents to ossification. It's not an average 10, no. It's a weighted rate. It's a weighted ranking based on how difficult it is to make the card useful. All right, up next, Corruption of Toashi. This card's really cool. So this is a cycle of cards that I think red doesn't get, which is big incubators. So at face value, this card is a 7 mana 4/4, which draws you a card. That rate is kind of bad. So the floor of this is a 3, because it's a little less severe when it's spread out over 2 turns. Because if you spread it out over 2 turns, it feels like a 6 mana 4/4 draws a card. That's a 3. That floor is a 3, but the ceiling of this is a 6 because it's any transforming permanent, which includes like, so you play this card on turn 5 and then you also flip this Captive Weird, you'll draw a card. Every incubate token transforms, which means that every incubate token draws a card. Once the Corruption of Tawashi yields 3 or 4 cards, then it's a huge amount of value that your opponent is not going to be able to get back. This card is an engine piece. But it's a little awkward not affecting the board directly on turn 5. So like this card is a build around, not just in the sense that you need a lot of transforming cards, it's a build around in the sense that you need to have a board state already down when Corruption of Tawashi comes down. This is a really good way for the blue control decks to grind out a game. It's so hard to beat one of these cards once it gets going. And I'll first pick it often and build around it, but like it's a pretty cool build around. You'll also see this card splashed a lot in the black-green incubate decks. So black-green and black-white are both sort of incubate decks, and you can just run an island and this card as your top end to get extra value out of your incubate tokens. Right, Alex, is exactly right. Oh, I want this Lycanroc real quick. I think this card is quite good, Springbok, but it's a build around in the truest sense. Like you can't just grab it and hope for the best. You have to consciously build around it. All right, up next we have Disturbing Conversion. So this card's pretty cool. It's one of the better versions of this card we've seen. At face value, this is an aura that gives -2/-0, which is enough to win a combat. It's a meaningful trick. The card gets a little bit better as a real removal spell, both in the control decks, because sometimes it's disabling an attacker so you can fly overhead or grind out value with your Tawashi. Is it good enough? But there's also a self-mill theme. There's cards that benefit from having cards in either player's graveyard in blue and black. It's a little bit better in that deck. It's still a pretty average removal spell, but having flash is pretty nice. I like it. I think it's solid. You'll take it, you'll play it, there's better removal. Hey, I got the Lycanroc. Oh, what's the jump card? We pulled it using a program, so there may be extra cards, but they should also all be there. So feel free to just ignore some of the jumpstart cards. All right, up next we have Afara's Dispersal. I'm actually going to lower the floor on this because there are some decks where it's just bad against, like the backup decks, but it's still going to average out to be a 3. Surveil 2 will feel like 2/3 of a card in this format. Being able to filter your draws is really nice, and there are relevant cards that you can put into your graveyard. This will often be kill a 4/4 Surveil 2 because Incubate 4 is a thing. So it's better against the Incubate decks. There are some big enough tokens that make this relevant. You can also pull value out of this card by just end step bouncing a creature to attack a battle down. So when we evaluate cards in this set compared to other sets, we will often be thinking about how it lets me combat this turn. Because if I am it's all about attacking, because you have to be able to hit a battle down, you have to be able to clear blockers, you have to be able to protect a battle that your opponent played by bouncing their attacker, and 1 mana is a pretty nice way to do that. The card's fine, it's not amazing, so I gave it a 3. A 3 is filler, it's a card you'll play, there's better removal, but there's dedicated battle decks, and there's be prepared to side it in a lot, because just hitting an Incubate token with this will feel pretty good if that's a 3/3 or bigger. Yes, that's true. That's true, Springbok. There's also situations where it's like there's a fair number of creatures that you don't really want to bounce, which is why I'd probably put this a little bit higher if there weren't so many backup creatures or ETBs. I like it. I'll be playing it. All right, up next we have Expedition Lookout. I gave it a floor of 3. It's usually going to play at that floor of 3. The dedicated mill deck likes this card as a finisher because it makes it unblockable. It's analogous to the Ichor Synthesizer in the last set, that 2 mana 1/3, which would attack as a 3/3 unblockable at 4 oil, but it takes a little bit harder to get to that mill. But blue just wants to be able to hold the ground down until this starts attacking. And once this starts attacking at a battle, you're pretty happy. So this is a solid control deck, weirdly way to get card advantage, because you play it early game to defend against battles, to block their 2/2s, because most of the 2 mana creatures are 2/2s, and then eventually you'll start being able to attack down battles. And if this would only hit players, it would not be playable. It would not be good enough. But being able to attack down the last few points of a battle or win battles, meaning this is a roundabout way to turn milled cards into card advantage. But it's a lot of work, which is why I gave it a high effort value. So you can get this up to a 5. It's a solid part of a control plan, but it's work. So it matters when you're blocking, right, Springbok? Because it blocks most of the 2/2s, which is most of the creatures, and it'll probably end up trading with a creature. But this isn't a situation where you play this as your only blocker. This is a situation where you play this as part of curving out, because you play your 2 mana 2/3, they play their 2 mana 2/2, you play your 3 mana 3/3, they play their 3 mana 3/3, or their Windrake, which you can't block anyway. We'll talk about Windrakes when we get to some. There's a lot of them in the set. And then when they're at a 5/5 and you're at a 5/5, that's probably when this will be able to attack. And hopefully you've been playing cards like this Disturbing Conversion, which means that on turn 5 or 6, this will start being able to attack. And we'll talk about this card a little more when we get to the battles. So Jinx, the way to think about mill, it's a trap, I think, that a lot of people think about. Let's say I have only 2 Planeswalkers in the deck, and then I play this Disturbing Conversion, and I mill 2 Planeswalkers. Well, I never had those Planeswalkers. They were never in my hand. I was never about to draw them. They're just in the graveyard now. And unless you draw literally your whole deck, then you were never going to draw those Planeswalkers. You are never going to have all your cards that you play with. So as much as I want to say, yes, I want to play with all the cards in my deck, unless I knew those cards were there, I'm not going to be upset that I milled them. You just got to play with the cards you draw. We're going to talk about Windrakes a lot, Springbok. There's so many. Every color except green has Windrakes, which is kind of interesting. All right, up next we have Eyes of Gitaxias. Now this is Kavu Climber. This is 5 mana for a 3/3, draw a card. Kavu Climber was one of the very first creatures we saw that replace itself when it came down as a 5 mana 3/3 that drew a card. That's what Eyes of Gitaxias is. It's a little bit better because it's spread out across 2 turns, but it's still not a great rate. There aren't enough cards with prowess. There are a few, but there aren't enough cards with prowess that make you want to play cards just for the sake of being a cantrip. There is a deck involving uncommons where I think this card is quite good, and I will talk about Eyes of Gitaxias more when we get there. because it's an uncommon in this set where if you can get 2 or 3 of them, this card is great. I think there's also a white-blue cheaty incubate deck, but that's a little bit tougher to parse because there's a Windrake that when it hits the player, transform an incubate token. So if you have the 2 mana, if you have the 2/2 that when it hits them will transform an incubate token, this card gets a lot better. But it's not something you pick early. You have to already have the incubate transform cards and you'll pick this up late, and you can get this up to a ceiling of 4, but it's usually gonna play closer to that floor of 2. And it's just, if you're wondering, how can a 3 mana draw spell that turns into a 3/3 on the following turn be bad? That's just how good this set is. I feel your pain, Jinx, but like, I'm telling you, it is a useful thing when playing this game to pretend that the cards that were milled were never a thing. Just delete them. Furtive Analyst. Card's fine. 3 mana 1/4 is a pretty good stat line. The looting is useful. It's not going to play that differently. It's going to feel like filler most of the time. You'd rather have a 3 mana 3/3 or something that does a little bit more, but the Analyst is fine. She does her job. It's usually going to play at a 3. There is exactly one uncommon that makes the stat line relevant in green, but it's not even, it works better with other cards. This card's just going to play like filler most of the time, and that's fine. Halo Charge Scab. This card is fine. It gets good if you have good instants or sorceries. You need the instant or sorcery to put back on top of your library to be pretty damn strong for this card to be worth playing, and then it's pretty fine. The instant or sorcery spell you have to play, or battle, there's some very good cards you can put back, but otherwise, yeah, isn't just not good enough. If this were a 2/4, it would be fantastic. That's just how the set is. 2/4 with Vigilance would be way too good in this set. It is, like, so in the last set, there was Melbweb Curator. Melbweb Curator was this card, but it didn't mill. The mill is actually relevant here. This card is actually closer to Gulping Scrap Trap out of the last set in terms of how it played. But there's a card, Melbweb Curator, which just was a 4 mana 3/4, put a card back on top. That card was bad unless you had Blue Sun's Twilight, which was take control of target creature. So there are good enough instant sorceries and battles that it's worth it. But they're mostly rare, so you want the rares already. Oh, thank you. Remember Aberrant Mind Sorcerer. All right, up next we have the battles of the set: Invasion of Kamigawa and Invasion of Vryn. So when we talk about battles, they'll essentially be sorted into 3 categories. The first is a battle that needs to be won for it to be relevant. The second is a battle that just does enough on the front face. And the third is a battle that helps you win it. So Invasions of Kamigawa, you have to take them all together. Rooftop Saboteurs is quite good. Invasion of Kamigawa is not a good card if you don't flip it, but it aids you in flipping it. So if you go 2-drop, 3-drop Invasion of Kamigawa, you will probably be able to attack the Invasion of Kamigawa down in the same turn. And if you flip this the turn you play it, Rooftop Saboteurs is going to do a lot of work, whether it's attacking down more battles you play or attacking your opponent. If this hits your opponent 1 time, then this stunned a creature for 2 turns and drew you a card. It's a little bit of planning, but it's not a ton of effort. The card is quite strong, but not on its front half and not on its back half. It's the halves taken together that's strong, compared to Invasion of Vryn, which is good because this front half is draw 3 cards, discard a card. That's 1 step above a Divination, not Catalog, Mystic Revelation. It's Mystic Revelation at sorcery speed, and will have to set up a little bit for this overloaded majoring. This is copy target spell. That's not an instant spell, not a sorcery spell, not an artifact. It is any spell you cast for 1 mana, you get a second copy of it. There's a lot of spells that do well with duplicating. This card is pretty cool. Like, it's a solid 3 for 1. It is 3 for 1. Your opponent gains 4 life and 5 mana, which is some work, but it's a cool card. I like this battle a lot. This to me is a card that you can evaluate mostly on the front half. Like, you don't have to flip this a turn you play. You can play this on turn 4, attack it in 6 or 7 turns from now. It's pretty cool. I like it. Sift. Thank you, Springbok. Appreciate it. Yeah, the dice aspect of the D&D sets is cool, but could really hurt you. I once died to somebody who rolled 4 consecutive crit 20s and got +3/+0 on every attack. Very mad. Oh, shoot. Thank you. You're absolutely right. Ah. Let's slide both of these up. Teensy bit. Thanks for letting me know, Ranger. Appreciate it. Okay. So here's Invasion of Vryn. Invasion of Kamigawa has 4. Invasion of Vryn has 4. The blue battles are kind of value machines. So like this one tends to play a little better with the blue-white knight tempo-oriented deck. And this one plays a little bit better with the blue-black or blue-green more control-oriented shells. And then blue-red can be either or both. Being able to switch gears on blue-red is what makes it strong. So the way battles work, Traith, if you want the full explanation, you can watch the intro yesterday. I talked about that a lot. But basically, you pay 4 mana. The siege enters, you choose an opponent to protect it. So you give it to your opponent, and then you can attack it. And when this number goes to 0, then it's defeated. So it's got 4 counters. You can attack. So you have to deal 4 damage to Invasion of Kamigawa. And then you get this half. So you exile it and you cast it, and then this comes into play. And it's a really... This is our first new card type. Shoot. When was Lorwyn? 2005? This is our first new card type in like 18 years. It's really cool, and it's a lot of text, but it's intuitive, right? I think it plays really intuitively. So like this whole set, there's a battle in every pack, and then this whole set is going to be sort of combat oriented because you give your opponent a battle to protect, and then you have to attack it down. And I'll be talking about them in relation to a lot of the other cards. Companion wasn't a new card type. Companion was a new subtype. So like, because every companion was a creature. So Saga and Companion were the last new subtypes, and then Tribal was a super type. This is our first new card type since Planeswalker in Lorwyn. I really like it. 2007, thank you, Springbox. So it's been, what, 15 years? First new card type in 15 years, and I love it. I think they nailed it. I love these. I think they're so cool. Yes, and the flavor makes sense too, right? Like you're battling for this piece of value, and like the winner is different for different battles. I think it's really cool. My only issue with battles is that they were hard to put into a slide. Yeah, but Goyf needed the buff, Traith. All right, up next we have Meeting of Minds. This card is so cool. All right, so this card is Divination with Convoke. It's Inspiration with Convoke. And it wants you to be a more controlling deck, because what you want is to be able to pass to your opponent, leave out the blockers, and then cast Meeting of Minds. You really want to convoke with 2 creatures for this card to be good, and it is specifically good in the Convoke deck. You can still play it in other decks and it'll be reasonable, but you'll have a lot of 2-for-1s in general. There's a lot of 2-for-1s in this set, so you don't need that many divinations, but it's really solid, and you will usually be able to cast this for 2 and 3 mana pretty happily, and in the very late game, you're fine just paying 4 for this. Really cool card. I'll be playing with it a lot in the Convoke decks, a little less with it in other decks. So Kaiser, every battle in this set is a siege. So they do have subtypes, and I think you might be right, but we'll see where they go. They have kind of bigger feelings, but like, so sagas, we're seeing lots of different kinds of sagas. And I think we're going to start seeing more things like that, more stages. More strict, just do a thing when it comes in, do a thing when you defeat it, rather than turn into a permanent. Yeah, I think you're right, Kaiser, but I think you kind of nailed it, because like every single one of these battles, this Phyrexians versus the people here. But if we do battles in a given area, let me change the music real quick. Like if we do battles specific to a plane, they can take on a flavor of that plane's wars. I think that's really cool too. Oh, I didn't get the Gorgeist. Yes, the control decks all have a lot of creatures because this set is mostly creatures. All right, up next we have Moment of Truth. This card is just anticipated with potential upside of putting a card into your graveyard. Don't worry too much about it. You're not going to play this. If you have crazy bombs to dig for, which there's a few, but nothing that wild, then you'll run this. If you have some prowess creatures, you'll run it, but you'll never be too happy about taking it. It's just too expensive for how little it does. Up next, we have Negate. Negate's a little bit better in this set than usual because every single pack has a battle. You still aren't going to want to main deck it too often, but you'll take it reasonably high because sometimes you'll have to, and because it happens to cost the same amount of mana as Incubate. So if you're running an Incubate deck, Negate goes up a lot because you're fine holding it Negate as a protection spell to maybe counter a battle or counter a removal spell, and then flipping an Incubate token if you don't get to cast it. It's a little, still, like, so normally this would be a 2 with a ceiling of a 4, but in this set it happens to be a 3 with a ceiling of a 5 because you have more battles to counter. Exactly, Ranger. There are uncommons and rares that have prowess that want you to play this card, but we're only doing commons and uncommons, and there's not enough of common and uncommon. If you open a rare with prowess, there's a few good ones. Go ahead and grab your moments, but you don't have to take them so high because you'll get them late pick because no one else wants them. All right, after Negate, so I gave Negate just a 3 with a floor of 2, ceiling of 5. This card is mostly a sideboard card. You might be okay playing one copy, and there are heavy enough control decks that you're okay playing Negates to counter battles. The red uncommon with prowess, and that is a reason to play Moment of Truth. Up next, we have Oculus Whelp. It hurt me to call this card bad, but 2 toughness, if this were a 2/3 or a 3/3, card would be fine. But a 4-mana 3/2, there's too many Windrakes in this set. This set has like 30, it has 26 flyers. I think it's 26 flyers. Hang on. This set has 22 flyers plus 6 reach creatures plus a few other ways to grab reach. It's mostly going to cycle. Like, it sucks, but this card is going to be just cycling most of the time. And your opponent has there's the potential of being blown out, because if you only have one artifact creature and your opponent bounces it or destroys it, then you're not going to get to draw your card, and it's just going to be a bad body. This card would have been so good in a lot of sets. I know Snapping Drake draw card is no longer playable. There is a deck that, so think of it a little bit like Talus Lookout in Dominaria. So you don't really want to play this card, but sometimes you're going to spend all of your picks on a removal, and you're going to just have to run some evasive 2-for-1s. If you have enough deal 2 damage to a creature, or target creature gets -2/-2, then this card is a little bit better because it does eventually win the game in the air, and if your opponent spends a removal spell on it, it replaces itself. But overall, it's pretty weak. Talus Lookout was better than this because you got to look at multiple cards, and it always drew the card even if you played it to an empty board. But like Talus Lookout was only a 3 or a 4, and it would have a place. So you can get this up to a 4, but you don't want to have to play this card. I'm actually going to lower. No, the ceiling's still a 4. If you can reliably transform a creature by turn 3, it's so hard to reliably transform a creature. I'm dropping the ceiling down to a 3. Exactly. Losing the tempo on this is going to feel devastating. Even if you get to draw the card, you will lose a game because your opponent just shocks this. So sad. It's really close. This card as a 3/3 would be great. This card as a 2/3 would be playable. So the ceiling is just where we can get it. It's just how hard we can get it. But yeah, I agree with you, Springbok. Also, we're not going to do cards. I usually try and do cards like without, not just within the set, but the cards in the set are so good. The power level, most of the cards in this set are the best version of this card. Like this card compared to Snapping Drake, yeah, it is better than Snapping Drake, and it's still not great. You can build around this, it's just not really worth it. All right, up next we have Omen Hawker. Love this card. So this card is a 1-mana 1/1, which, as we talked about earlier, means that it's pretty good for Convoke. You get to use it to just convoke your spells. However, it also has tap, transform and incubate token. That's really good in this set. Every incubate token coming in as a creature rather than as an egg is amazing. And there's also lots of niche cases for it. So like if we look at the blue cards we looked at so far, this is a 1-mana 1/1 that taps to make 2 mana, which also pays the mana for Artistic Refusal. Also lets you flip this incubate token the turn you cast the Assimilate Essence. Also pays 1 mana for this Astral Wingspan. Also pays 2 mana to transform your captive weird. Also, this card is bad. Also pays 2 mana to let this 4/4 transform the turn it comes down. So out of the first 8 cards we looked at, it pays for 8 cards. It also makes this card good. So it makes Eyes of Gitaxias quite good. So you will get last pick Eyes of Gitaxias. And when you have a couple Omen Hawkers, then you can start grabbing those up. So like Omen Hawker lets you play the cards that would otherwise be last picks. Card is really cool. Yeah, no, this card, I'm raising the ceiling. Because like a 4 is average. If you don't have cards to play with it, it's bad. Don't play it. But it's not hard to get cards to play with it even within blue. And if you pair it with like green, it's pretty cool. I love this card. The design's fantastic. I remember they previewed it and everyone was like, well, is this card going to be good? Because no one actually knew. And it turns out this card is fantastic. It's one of the better uncommons in the set. I mean, there are a fair number of blue, like there's Freed from the Real, which is blue, untap this creature. So this card plus Freed from the Real is infinite mana on turn 3, but only to activate abilities, which is really cool. You can, okay, Omen Hawker plus Freed from the Real is infinite mana, plus Paradise Mantle is infinite mana that you can cast, that can you use for stuff. And since it's 0 to play and equip is an ability, you can play Paradise Mantle and have infinite mana on turn 3. Or on turn 2 if you have an Elvish Spirit Guide. If this were a common, you could do it in Pauper. Great card, floor of 2, ceiling of 6. It averages out to be a 4. It's worth first picking, but like don't take it late if you aren't in this deck. Really fantastic design. I still love this card. All right, up next we have the Oracle of Tragedy. This card is just very efficient. So a 2 mana 1/3 that lets you loot is good. That early game card filtering is really valuable, and we've seen that in a lot of cards like Fissure Wizard, Scrapwork Mutt. Lots of those cards have been solid. Oracle of Tragedy is still pretty good in the late game because you can actually draw enough cards and control the game enough that this Oracle of Tragedy will let you keep going. Like we've seen bad versions of this with double Devious Cover Up, which is counter a spell, shuffle 4 cards from your graveyard into your library, and playing both of these cards to loop your mana is solid. This is a reasonable way to put 4 relevant cards back into your deck in the late game and loot on turn 2, and a 1/3 is a good blocker in this format. Solid card all around. You'll take it pretty high for your blue decks, but it's not really worth going into blue 4. I like it. Good design. Up next we have Order of the Mirror. It's a 2 mana 2/1, which is fine. It flips into a 3/3 with flanking. Oops. These should both be 4s. There we go. The reason that I bumped this card up to a 4 is because I saw the rest of the Knights in this set. Having 2 mana Knights that transform when you need them to is really good. And Order of the Alabaster Order of the Alabaster Host can't be gang blocked by lots of 1/1 tokens or lots of incubate tokens because of that ability. So it's nice being able to flip this when you need to. It's bad if you flip it on turn 3, because if you're just paying 2 life to crack through, it's not great. But letting this be a 2/1 for 4 or 5 turns and then turning it into a relevant attacker is really solid. Yeah, like they could just say flanking and this card would be so much more elegant. So for those of you who weren't playing Magic 20 years ago, or 2006, those of you who were playing Magic in 2006, flanking is this. It is exactly this test. Whenever this creature becomes blocked by a creature, that creature gets -1/-1. It's pretty cool. I like this card. It's also Knight is a really relevant creature type. Phyrexian is a relevant creature type. Transforming is a relevant game action. So having all of that on a 2 mana 2/1, solid. It's really relevant, Jinx. Next, we have the best blue common. This is the card that I revised the most over the course of this set review. It doesn't look like much, I know. But here's a Windrake that also makes a 1/1 red and blue elemental token, which means you can splash your red Convoke spells. You have 2 bodies per Convoke. You have a 2/2 flyer for battles. It's a Knight, which means it receives Knight buffs, and it does the Knight things when it comes into play. It works with all of the blue blinking. So just for the color pairs, if this is blue-red, it makes 2 bodies for Convoke. If this is blue-black, it makes 2 bodies for your sacrifice thing, so you got to be able to sacrifice stuff. If this is blue-white, it is both a knight and a creature worth blinking. If this is blue-green, then it's a flyer for attacking down battles. This is a premium common in every single blue archetype for different reasons, which means that even if you're just pairing it with the other blue cards, you can get something out of both halves of this card. It's the best, like, so we've seen this card before. Like, Eldrazi Sky Spawner made it 1/1 that made mana. Attendant Knight was a first striker. This just does a little bit of everything. This is up there for best common. I gave out 2 other 6s, I believe, to commons. One of them is black. Black is a little bit weak, but has really strong individual cards. So we'll see a lot of black splashes. Up next, we've got the Protocol Knight. Yeah, this card will be the card that you first pick all the time when there's just nothing worth building around in this pack, because it goes into everything. E for bird. It's a bird knight. I love that. All right, up next we've got the Protocol Knight. This card is only really good in the Knights deck, but it's so good in the Knights deck. Like, this is game ending in the Knight deck. It's a little bit like let's see, Bergstrider or Frost Trickster, but the body size is really relevant on this. 4 toughness is a major milestone, and having it on you want your 4 drops to have 4 toughness. Bergstrider, you do have to have other knights. If you don't have other knights, this card is not great. Like, it's still a playable card. You'll still run it. I'm actually going to lower the floor to a 3. The floor of that is a 3 as a 4-mana 3/4 that taps a creature when you don't have knights. But it's not hard to have knights. So many knights in both colors attached to really good cards. This is another card that I bumped up a lot because I actually had it at a 3, and then I bumped it up to I had it at a 4, and I bumped it up to a 5, and I bumped the ceiling up to a 6, because you'll have decks with 5 Protocol Knights. Like, if you're the Knight deck, you want every Protocol Knight you can get. It's very good. There are a lot of bonuses for Knight's Jinx. The white blue here, I'll pull one up. So Marshal Zalfur is the white blue signpost uncommon. Look at this thing. 2 mana 2/2 Lord that taps creatures. Like, this thing is so pushed. But even like the white blue Saga. Oh, sorry, the white Saga makes a knight token. And we'll go through actually a few, like, the actual knights are good enough to run on their own. So the knight payoffs are essentially free. Because, like, if you're already taking every Preening Champion you can get, Preening Champion into Protocol Knight means you're attacking for 3 this turn. Yes, there are a lot of knight bonuses. All right, up next we have the Referee Squad. This is a really good card for the Convoke decks, but it's also solid in general. Like, if you're paying 3 mana for this, great. But this will often come down on turn 2 and tap down a Mana Dork, or turn 5 and tap down a relevant blocker, and then Vigilance is a relevant ability. There's not too much to say about this. It's just efficient. You'll convoke it some of the time. Importantly, it is a convoke creature that isn't... You won't often convoke this. You'll only convoke this... It's only relevant to, like, the Blue-Red Lord, which does something whenever you convoke a spell. It's cool. It's part of a big... Storm feeling deck. I like it. All right, next we have the Cyber Cryptomancer. Cool card all around. What this is, so you'll play this most often in blue-black. This is the only blue black up card at common, and it's a good one. So when you play this, you give something else a +1/+1 counter and hexproof. So the way this ends up playing out is it's just an instant. It's a protection spell. We see these all the time. It's 2 mana, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, and give it hexproof. But the Cyber Cryptomancer also sticks around to be a body that convokes other spells, or that you sacrifice to your black decks, or that just chump blocks. So it's solid. It's a little bit better than just a 2 mana protection spell. I'm actually gonna bump up the ceiling, because when it's good, you'll be really happy to have it. It is a Moonfolk Breakdancer. That's exactly right. It's just such a distracting dance. Kind of agree with you, Ninja. I liked that they had I like that they replaced hexproof for the most part. There's only a few cards with hexproof in this set. This is one of them. The other one is an 8/8, which we'll talk about soon. All right, up next we have Skyclave Aerialist. This card is just so efficient. Like it does all the things with transforming that we've been talking about, but a 2-mana 2/1 flyer is just very efficient in this format. And then later you can pay 4 or 5 mana to turn it into to draw a card. Like this is a 2-mana 2/1 that says monstrous, get +0/+3, draw a card. Very efficient, good attacker, does a lot. You can make it a blocker when you need it to, or you can attack through Windrakes. Like, that's really what this comes down to, is this is a 2/1 fast attacker for 2 mana that later attacks through Windrakes, and everybody's got some Windrakes. Alright, up next, Stasis Field. This effect is normally pretty bad. Ichthyomancy is a 3-mana spell, so this is a 2-mana spell. Turning off abilities is pretty relevant in this format. There's a lot of creatures that you don't really want to kill or bounce, so being able to say you don't matter anymore is good, but you really only want this in your construction, in your giving your opponent jump blocker is bad in a lot of situations, so you need a good way to break through. You need a lot of flyers, then this card is fine. Because if you're a flyer deck, disabling your opponent's flyer is pretty relevant. Stopping them from transforming is irrelevant. You gotta be a little careful, because if you put this on an incubator, then you just give them +0/+2. There are enough +1/+1 counters that it's a card you gotta be careful with. The medium refers more to when you play it in difficulty rather than where it goes into your deck. Blue does not have a ton of removal, and you'll need to play some Stasis Fields, but you're not gonna be too happy about it. Is that what, Ben? I don't know what that is. I actually don't know what this is. What is this? Is it Multani? Is this from the... I don't know what this is from. Oh, thanks, Halva. Me too, Alex. Me too. Yes, exactly. There are big, scary things you have to be able to take out, and Stasis Field does that. All right. Up next, we have Temporal Cleansing. So this card is a little bit better in the Convoke decks, but not by enough that I care. It's just efficient removal. Like, it tucks it. So it puts it 2 cards down or on the bottom of the library, and you can turn this into real removal if you have to with the mill cards. There's a lot of ways to mill your opponent for just a couple cards in this set. So this is essentially a 4-mana deal with a permanent at sorcery speed. In any other set, I would have put this a little bit higher, but 1-for-1 removal is not always going to be good enough in this set. 1-for-1 removal at sorcery speed is just going to be a 4 in this set. And you'll take this and you'll play it and you'll splash it. I should probably raise the ceiling a little bit, because with a little work, it's a little bit better, and in the Convoke deck, it's a little bit better. It's just solid blue removal. If this were an instant, it would be insane. If this were an instant, it would be my pick for best comment in the set, because it's so easy to hold up 2 creatures and just have 2 mana to deal with whatever your opponent is doing. This is really cool. It is Jinx. So it's variably huge. Turning off abilities is variably huge on the Stasis Field. That's why the floor and the ceiling I showed are different. I like this card. Like, blue needs a certain number of copies of it. It just, eventually you will realize that you can't actually cast these. You will run out of ability to cast them. But the Convoke deck wants more copies of this, which is why I just raised the ceiling. It's pretty good. It's fine. All right, Thunderhead Squadron. This is an example of a bad Convoke spell, because if you tap 3 creatures, which means you're giving up damage to cast this spell, then you're giving up attackers and blockers to cast this spell. And then if your opponent just bounces it or kills it, you're out some creatures. You'll have to play this sometimes. And I think there might be a dedicated tokens deck where this card is solid. If you can play, like, the thing is, we're at a stage of Magic where a 6-mana 3/4 is unacceptable. A 5-mana 3/4 is barely playable, but you're not happy about it. A 4-mana 3/4 is fine without being good, and a 3-mana 3/4 flying is great. Which means that if you have 3 expendable creatures who wouldn't be attacking or blocking otherwise, then you can play this card. And that is a really hard situation to create. If there are rares that boost Convoke enough, then you can still play this card, which there are some rares that boost Convoke enough. But you need those rares first, which is why the ceiling is a 4. It's a lot of work to get it up to 4. I'm actually raising the effort level from medium to high, because needing a rare to be good is high effort. Oops, that's a card I want to talk a lot about. All right, so card's fine. You're not happy about playing it, you'll still have to play it sometimes. If this had flash, it would be great. So like that's actually a great point, Kaiser, because if we look like when you were talking earlier, I was talking about how instants with Convoke are great, sorceries with Convoke are not. Or variable. Like if this had flash, you'd be really happy to hold up 5 blockers and then cast this either to block something that they thought they were going to punch through in the air with, or just on their end step. You're not giving up the defensive capabilities of those creatures. You're only giving up offense, which is much smaller sacrifice. Exactly, Jinx. That's exactly right. All right, up next we have Tidal Terror. This is another card I bounce around a little bit on. So I love big creatures with island cycling or land cycling. I like those modal creatures. So like if this were a 6 mana 5/6 vanilla with cycling, then you'd be pretty happy with it, because either it's going to be the late game when you can cast a 6 mana 5/6, or it's going to be in the early game when you need a land or a new card. And that's what this Tidal Terror does. So you will either need an island or be able to cast this most of the time. The reason Tidal Terror is a little bit better than usual is it kills 19 out of all 20 battles in one attack. So if you play this on turn 6 and you've been waiting to cash out on your battles, then tapping those 2 untapped creatures isn't so terrible, because this is going to kill a battle and you will get that creature again right away. It does have diminishing returns. You cannot play too many copies of this card, but it's fine as a finisher, even at 2, sometimes 3 copies in some blue decks. It is nice being able to always kill a battle when you attack with it, even if you're tapping a few other creatures. But blue, because it's the Convoke colors, is a lot more likely to have a couple other creatures floating around. Solid card, better than it looks. Basic land cycling is very good. The white one is nuts. The white one is an O-ring on a 3/4 for 6 mana that you can always splash. We'll talk about all the others after this. Up next, Wicked Slumber. Card is fine. We saw this in the last set with 2 stun counters, but being at instant speed compared to sorcery speed is like having 2 stun counters, because you let your opponent tap when they go to combat, you tap down the creatures. This will still buy you 2 to 3 turns of combat. You really do want this to be in the Convoke deck, but if you're just tapping a creature or 2 in like a white blue deck, then you can get a lethal attack with this. You just have to be like, it's not hard removal, but it'll feel like hard removal a lot of the time. Yeah, I think it's because some of the colors are just better at land cycling, and I kind of like that flavor, Springbok. Like white and green should be better at basic land cycling than the other colors, but I kind of think that blue should be pretty good at it too, because of water. Like things tend to have island home, so island cycling makes sense to me. All right, next we have, I think this is the best blue uncommon. Certainly is the one that I gave the highest rating to. Yeah. Gave a blue common a 6 as well. All right, Xeric Strobe Knight. Now this is a Windrake. All right, so 3 mana 2/2 flying, almost good enough, not quite there. 3 mana 2/2 flying vigilance, great. Being able to attack your opponent's battles without having to go shields down to block, so much better. A 3 mana 2/2 that makes a 2/2 every turn is nuts. And the thing about the Xeric Strobe Knight is there's lots of little ways to enable this card, because if you just play a cheap spell, like sometimes you'll play 2 cheap spells, make a 2/2. Sometimes you'll play a really big spell and then a Convoke spell, make a 2/2. Sometimes you'll play a really big spell and attack down a battle, because when a battle is defeated, when it goes down to 0 counters, you exile it and cast the other side. So that counts as one of the 2 spells for the Xeric's Knight. If you make a single 2/2 with Vigilance with this card, you're way ahead. If you make 2 or 3 2/2s, you never have to block with this card again, and you can just keep making 2/2s, and they're all relevant bodies. This is also a way to make Knights at instant speed to trigger all the things that care about Knights coming into play on your opponent's turn. Very good card, best blue uncommon, possibly the best uncommon in the set. Very true. All right, up next, Zephyr Winder. It's just efficient. It's a 2 mana 2/1. It has a set. It's basically vigilant, but there's also cards that you are happy to untap with it. Just a solid creature. It's a good attacking flyer. You want to play this with ground blockers in blue, but you're also fine just trading this for your opponent's Windrake. You can also play a Xeric Strobe Knight Tap it to make a 2/2, attack with both of them. So you can attack with both of these, deal 4 damage with the Zephyr Winder trigger on the stack. Tap to make a 2/2, it'll untap, and you'll make a second 2/2. So these two cards together will put 4 power worth of Knights into play. Very strong. All right, Zalfrin Shapecraft. So this is another card on my revisit list. We saw this effect a few times in Angelic Metamorphosis and Suit Up. The thing about the Shapecraft is it's not likely. So you will have situations occasionally where your 1/1 manages to eat a 2/2 from your opponent, and you will get a 2-for-1. But it's not an ideal 2-for-1, right? Because you are drawing a card and killing a 2/2, and that's fine, but it's a little bit of work to set up. It's more likely that you are going to be turning your 1/1 or random extra token into a 4/3 to trade up with your opponent's 3/3 or 4/4, and then this card is still just a 1-for-1. So it's a reasonable card, but it's going to usually feel like a 1-for-1 or deal 2 damage, draw a card, which is fine, but not amazing. It's not something you have to pick that high. Battles and Phyrexian Censor. Wait, what's not in the set? Is one of these in Jumpstart? The Winder is not in the set. How can you tell? C0328. Oh, I see. So Zephyr Winder is not in the set. Is greater than 300. Is there another card that I talked about that was in Jumpstart? All right, we're just going to delete the Zephyr Winder set. I was really excited to draft it. I'm a little sad that it doesn't exist. Okay, thank you. If there's any others you see, let me know. It came up when I searched for... Oops. Ansel. It came up when I searched just for the set, so... But I appreciate it. I will be right back. I gotta refill my water, and then we will go on to the next set. Yeah, I'll tell you what. We'll vote on which color you want to do next. All right. What color should we talk about next? We've got green, black, or red. So choose your Jund. I'm gonna go get some water, and I'll be right back. Where'd my music go? I think it's just a quiet song. Oh, sorry, Springbok. I did white yesterday. Hey, Rusty. Oh, heck yeah. This set is awesome. It's okay, Jinx. It's pretty short, and I have it up on YouTube, so I'll make sure to post it here at the end. Hey. The... You guys make it so difficult to choose. All right, I'll choose. We're going in color order, so we'll do black next. We just did blue. Hey, Foxy. So, black in this set is pretty weird because overall, it's the weakest color. But that's because of synergies, not because the individual cards are weak. Good to see you, Foxy. We're doing a set review today. You let me know if you have any questions. So, black is a little weaker, but the cards just don't mesh quite as well. Individually, there's some real bangers. All right, so up first we have Aetherblade Agent. This is a little better than usual. There's not as many good pings. There's still a few that you have to be careful of. And there's not as many... There's a problem with Death Touch creatures that aren't 1 mana due to how they mesh with the pump spells in a given set. So like in Neon Dynasty, which we've been playing a lot of, the 1 mana 1/1 Death Touch creature is really strong because there's nothing that like it's Tamiyo's Safekeeping is the main trick that people play. The other tricks people play are like +3/+3 or +4/+4. It's just size. That doesn't matter to Death Touch. This set is kind of in a mix. There's nothing quite on the level of Take Up the Shield, but there is a spell that grants protection, and there's a spell that grants there's one protection and 1 indestructible and 1 first strike, but the first strike is kind of bad. They haven't killed black. It's just in this set. Black's been the best in a few sets. Don't worry. Don't worry, Jinxie, it's not normal. It's just in this set. And black is still quite strong, it's just not as archetypical. So here's Aetherblade Agent. Aetherblade Agent is a 2 mana 1/1 Death Touch. It's not great, it's fine. But it flips into the Mind Stinger, which nobody wants to block. So the Aetherblade Agent is usually just going to be a 1 mana 1/1 Death Touch. If you pair it with some tricks, which we'll talk about in just a moment, it gets a lot better. It's just solid though. Like you can put some work in and get more than a 2 mana 1/1 Death Touch out of it, but usually it's going to be a 1 mana 1/1 and it's not always the common you want to play. You need to find a few synergies with it. It's solid though. All right, next we've got Bladed Battle Fan. This card is way better than it looks. So it's no Quicksilver Dagger. This essentially says 2 mana, save a creature from a combat or removal spell, have a square, have a rectangle. So that rectangle is relevant to so many different black and red cards. So having this be an Offer Immortality, a target creature gets indestructible, and then having it stick around for a card like, where'd you go? So black red and blue black and white black all have mechanics. Hang on, where'd you go? Where did you go? Here you are. All have mechanics for turning those extra leftover rectangles into new cards. So you don't really want to equip this too much. There's a few good reasons to keep it around as an equipment, but mostly this is just a combat trick, which then turns into value down the line. It's solid. It is sack fodder, exactly, Alex. Leftover rectangles, I like that term. It's not the worst. Like you'll find uses for this, that power is gonna be relevant, and that's just a bonus. Really, the reason to play this card is that you can sacrifice it. And there's a lot of good reasons to sacrifice it. All right, up next we have Blight Reaver Thallid. This card is just hyper efficient. So it's usually gonna play at a 5. It's a 2 mana 2/2 on turn 3 or on turn 4, or more likely much later in the game. That's not quite true, Alex, because it's still 2 mana to get them on. Card's really good. So this is transforms into a 3/3 that generates a Saproling and flips. And if you happen to have cards that are like, oh, this is supposed to be a 5. This is supposed to be the same stats as this. All right, great. So if you happen to have ways to use those extra Saplings, use those leftover rectangles, you're very happy. And if you don't, it's not a huge deal. Like you're still getting 5 power total out of this card. It's solid. Like often it'll just be a 2 mana 2/2 that trades, and that's okay. That's when you need it to be that, you're going to be really happy to have that. And your opponent's going to be spending real removal to kill it before you can flip it. But getting 3 bodies out of 1 card is great, especially because they're all Phyrexians, and there's cards that care about having Phyrexians out. Up next, Collective Nightmare is just hyper efficient. We're raising the floor to a 4. This is just really efficient removal. It's removal you can play when you're tapped out. One thing I'm going to be talking about a little bit later, and when I do the 100 trophies, is if your opponent plays a third creature, taps out on turn 2 for a second creature, and then plays a land and taps out on turn 3 for a third creature, and there's a pause, well, they have Collected Nightmare. If there's no pause, then they play a fourth creature, and there's a pause, they have Stoke the Flames. And if there's a pause after the second creature, they have target creature gets +2/+2 and flying. So you'll be able to read Convoke spells by paying attention to the pauses, because there aren't that many at each given mana cost and instant speed. And a lot of them only trigger at specific times. So reading pauses in Arena is going to be an important way to figure out which Convoke spells your opponent has. In addition to this, like if you're paying 3 mana to give a creature -3/-3, you're happy. It's great. If you can play this card on turn 2 or turn 3 or on turn 5 for free, you're even happier. This is just so efficient and strong, and you'll see people splashing this a lot. Lots of people have this card. Also, an interesting thing is Convoke. If you have, where'd you go? Where'd you go? Oh, here. So this will let you play a white Convoke spell, and this lets you play a green Convoke spell. So you can splash off-color Convoke spells with transforming creatures, which I think is really cool. Yes, you can transform a card into black. Thank you. You can transform a card into black, and it'll let you cast Collective Nightmare. There's so many little things to an otherwise simple card that makes it very strong, and first picking it doesn't necessarily commit you to black. Just good. It's very good. All right, completed Huntmaster. This is one of those ways to use the rectangles left over from that fan. 3 mana 2/3, not great. 3 mana 2/3 that incubates a creature 1 time is good. So if you can turn 1 creature into a 3/3, you're pretty happy. And once you untap with this, you're probably not going to tap out again for the rest of the game. Like maybe you just flip to Blightsower Thallid, and then now you make a 3/3, and then you transform the Blightsower Thallid into a 3/3, and then you transform the 1/1 into a 3/3, and then your opponent plays Destroy Target Artifact on your 3/3. Well, you say in response, I'm going to sacrifice my 3/3 and make it 3/3. This card's great. It's work. You have to build around a little bit. You need to find your spare rectangles, but just really efficient build around. I think it's a very strong build around too. It's a little fragile. You have to protect it, but if you protect it for just a little while, suddenly you're going to find yourself pulling way ahead. Up next, Consuming Aetherborn. Giving something lifelink for a turn isn't good enough. If this game put a lifelink counter on something, you'd be really happy. You should try to evaluate the backup cards. So black doesn't have any inherent synergies with, so red-white has inherent synergies with backup, green-white has inherent synergies with counters, black doesn't have either of those, which makes this card pretty average. It's not strong. You don't usually want to play it. You'll side it in against more aggressive decks, but even then, dealing with an aggressive deck with a 4-drop doesn't feel good, especially one that doesn't block that well. This card's pretty bad. A little sad. There's also not any crazy synergies with it that I've found, and it's usually just going to be a 4 mana 3/3 lifelink. That's not really what you're looking for in this format. Yes, if you get this onto a double striker, the thing is, the double striker that we talked about yesterday, there's a 1/3 mana, there's a 1/3 double striker for 3. It's a little weird because the black-white deck doesn't really want to play either of those cards unless they're paired. And this isn't a set where you splash bad cards. You just don't have to. Your power level is so high. You need a really good reason to be splashing. Like the thing is, none of the black card, all the white cards pump that 1/3 double striker way better than the Aetherborn does. Card's pretty average. Like there are cards that care enough about having the counter and the lifelink that come down the turn before this, that with some effort, you can get it up to a playable. That's not usually going to be worth it. Don't pick it high. Up next, Corrupted Conviction. This card's just Village Rites in a set where you have a little bit more. I thought this said artifact or creature. This only sacrifices a creature. It's pretty average. But like, it's fine. You'll play it. You'll stack random creatures to it. There's more things. Yeah, black's a little awkward in this set. There are more sacrifice outlets than things to sacrifice. But you can get, like, look at this one. This card's a banger. The good black is Feast or Famine. This card's just great. It's 4 mana to destroy a creature or planeswalker, leave behind a rectangle that you can feed. Yeah. Well, so the ceiling would be a 3 and the floor would be a 2. But I actually think this card is playable. Like, I'll play it a reasonable amount of the time. Just because if I'm dodging a removal spell to draw 2 cards, I'm pretty happy. And 1 black mana is a reasonable amount to do that. Like, I'm fine playing it as a 3. This is a functional reprint of Village Rites. Alright, up next we have Deadly Derision. Card's just really good. Like, Grim Bounty was one of the very best cards in Forgotten Realms, which was also a pretty strong set. And this is that, plus it's an instant instead of a sorcery. Plus, black has a ton of ways to use this treasure for more cards. There's so many, like, imagine playing a Deadly Derision and then sacrificing your treasure to make a 3/3. It's pretty good. Fortunately, this card is very hard to splash. This set is not good for splashing. This card is hard to splash in this set. This is why you play black. And it's not a bad thing. Like, if you get a pick 6 Deadly Derision because other people are avoiding black, you'll end up with a deck with a big pile of Deadly Derisions. So, like, black is the weakest color in this set, but not by enough that you should avoid playing it if it's flowing. There's enough to have one really strong black deck at each table. How you doing, Beard? Drag Recycler. Card's just fine. Like, it's a sack outlet. It's a 3-mana. It's a 2-mana 2/2. Chances are you will. It's not unplayable. You'll get to block with it, and it can sacrifice itself. So being able to dodge like threatens or threaten something else and sack it is fine. But it's not the 2/2 you want. It's just fine. Deadly Derision is so good. This is contended for best common, and like the floor of it is a 6. Floor of it should probably be a 5, but like it's always gonna feel like a blowout. Removal is a little worse in this set because so much of it is there's so many 2-for-1s, but like you still need some of it. You need to be able to disrupt engines, and this will feel like a 2-for-1 if you have any way to use that treasure as a rectangle that you can sacrifice. All right, up next we have Etched Familiar. This card is just pretty efficient. This as a death trigger is good in aggressive decks because you can just keep, like, if this were when it dies draw a card, well, your opponent just wouldn't block it. But if you're actively trying to kill them, then this will probably trade and drain them too. It's solid. I think it plays really well. It's reverse Vampire Spawn and it's slightly better aggressively. And if in a lot of formats, like, this would be worse than Vampire Spawn because getting this on the front end when it comes in is such a big difference. But it's not a huge difference here because it's really easy to sacrifice, and it's also even if you don't have a sack outlet, you can just keep hitting them with it. All right, up next we've got Etched Host Doombringer. This card is a little harder to unpack. It's really cool. 5 toughness is one of the magic numbers in this set. Once you're at 5 toughness, you dodge a lot of the strongest removal spells. There's not a lot of cards with there's not a lot of people who want to kill this. But what this ends up doing is killing a battle. Like, this kills a battle quite often. 3 defense counters is going to be enough to kill. It only kills like 4 or 5 of the battles outright, but it brings a lot of the battles within range of just a 1/1 attacker, which black has a few of. 5 toughness is good, so even if you're just playing this to drain your opponent too, it's still a fine play. Lowering the floor to a 3 because that's what this card will be if you're just draining your opponent too. But it's a solid card, and even defending the battles that they played is pretty cool. I like this card a lot. It's sort of where you end up wanting to be at 5 mana. All right, up next we have Failed Conversion. This card is a little bit like Molten Rebuke. It's a little bit better than Molten Rebuke. You'll have to play it some of the time, but it's usually going to be your worst removal spell. Surveil 2 is a nice little bonus, and being able to kill something, like playing this on your opponent's 6/6 to make it a 2/2, isn't going to feel that bad. You play it when you need other removal. The thing is, what black has is removal. Like, usually when we say this is the worst color in the set, we mean it's missing something fundamental. Really, black has great removal. Like, you can make a good black deck because its removal is so strong. And so this would normally be a little higher. This is in relation to all of the other removal black has. Yeah, but Surveil 2 is a pretty significant upside. Like, Surveil 2 is probably 2/3 of a card. So as long as it's actually getting a kill, it's solid. Yeah, I like this card, though. I'll probably play a copy or two. It's just a little awkward in terms of curve because your 5s tend to be pretty strong. But this is also, like, splashable. It's fine. Molten Rebuke, I think, is a pretty good analogy from the last set. And Molten Rebuke was kind of bad, but you still had to play it sometimes. And this set is not nearly as fast as All Will Be One was. Final Flourish. This card is really good. Looking at these two, it's like, well, why is this one 5 mana? But being able to just throw your treasure to deal something, like on turn 2, this will kill anything. On turn 10, this will kill almost anything. Stat-wise, it kills, when you're giving something -2/-2, it kills 51% of all the creatures, and it's going to be a much higher number if you're attacking with your own 2/2. And at 6, it kills 99% of the creatures in the format. So for 2 mana, sacrifice an extra treasure or sacrifice a creature who's already dying. Kills 99% of the creatures in the format at instant speed for 2 mana. This is a very good card. Vicious Offering, but better. This Vicious Offering with an extra -1/-1. Next, we've got, like, this is just premium black removal. And it's not even the best black removal spell, which is really funny to me. All right, up next we have Flitting Gorilla. This is a Windrake with all the upside. You play this card, don't play this card when you need a Windrake. Play this card when you need to mill. I love the art here. I guess it's a reference to, I want to say Hurly Burly, card from Lorwyn. It's pretty cool. I like it. But yeah, it's a 3 mana 2/2. You don't really play this because it recovers a threat later in the game, which that is a relevant line of text. It's not a strong line of text, but picking up a 6/6 or a relevant creature in the late game is nice. You play this when you need a Crow of Dark Tidings. You play it when you need to mill both of you. It's solid. Sure thing, Rusty. Get some sleep, buddy. I'm going to post this to YouTube tonight, and you can see it so people can reference it. I try and make it so that people can jump around, see, oh, I got these colors. Let's see how to build with them. Good night, Rusty. All right, up next, we've got, oh, everybody check out $30 Vintage. That's what Rusty runs. And I think he's got a tournament coming up on Monday. Up next, we have Gifted Completion. This card is on my revisit list. Yeah, so he's running a tournament on Monday, April 17th, and it's pretty cool. I highly recommend it. He allows proxies, and your deck can't be worth more than $30. Great format. So, Gift of Completion is a card where you can assume every creature in your deck is a Phyrexian, or at least enough of them are, because when you incubate and then you flip them, they turn into Phyrexians. So, the question here is it worth having a 4 mana 3/3, which says whenever a creature you control dies, Surveil 1? I think it is, especially because it's spread out over 2 turns. Because, like, this is a 4 mana 3/3, but you can play it on turn 2, and it doesn't feel so behind on tempo when, even if you spent 4 mana, you have your 3/3 on turn 3. I think it's pretty solid. I like the Surveil a lot. If it turns out that Surveil isn't good enough, which Surveil isn't good enough when every card matters, which every card might matter in this set. But being able to dig for your better ones is still nice. And if Surveil doesn't matter that much, this card is still fine. I would just drop it to a 3. So without the Surveil, this card is a 3. With the Surveil, this card is a 4, and I really like it. It's also nice because lots of cards care about Phyrexians and Incubates. No, so Incubate. So when you incubate 3. This will make a token, which looks like... Hang on. This is what the token looks like, this incubator. So it's a 0/0, and if you incubate 3, you put 3+1/+1 counters on it, and then you pay 2 mana, and you turn your 0/0 into a 3/3. So it's a little bit like Investigate, but this is 2 mana, make a token that turns into a 3/3. So it's 4 mana for a 3/3 whenever a Phyrexian you control dies, Surveil 1. That's how we parse it. And the way this set is designed is kind of brilliant, Jinx, because, like, yes, this is a lot of text. This is a complex card. But once it's down, it's just going to be a 3/3 in front of you. Like, you can parse that board state much more easily than you can parse this card. So that's kind of why I have really high hopes for this set, is because there's a lot of complexity, but there's also a lot of simplicity in the bodies you have out. Incubate is a really interesting and cool mechanic. I like it a lot. It's analogous to Investigate, and I would argue that if it's a 2/2 token, Incubate 2 is as strong as Investigate. Making a 2/2 for 2 mana is comparable to drawing a card for 2 mana, provided that they aren't repeatable. All right, up next we have Glistening Deluge. This is the black hate card. This card I came up a lot on because all creatures get -1/-1 until end of turn. Doesn't feel like much, but giving all green creatures -3/-3 means you'll usually get a kill. Getting all white creatures -3/-3 will usually get you a kill. And coincidentally, blue and red just have a lot of 1 toughness creatures. So this card is only bad against a mono black deck, which with the power level of black isn't going to happen too often. So the effort value on this card is high when you take it, not because it's purely a sideboard card, but because you have to be careful in how you construct your deck to have or not have 1/1 or 1 toughness creatures. It's a little bit better. Good night, Springbuck. Yeah, it's a great format. I do have early access this Thursday if you want to come and see how these cards play. And what I like to do is take these set reviews, put everything into practice, and we can see where I was wrong. All right, next we have Gloomfang Mauler. Large land cycling creatures are just solid without being amazing. This card is a 7 mana 7/7 because it's a 5/5 with backup 2, and it's a 7/7 worth of power. So 7 mana 7/7 with menace is fine. The fact that you can swamp cycle it early is great. It's mostly fine. This is the biggest creature that you can get rid of just for 2 mana, which means if you have something that returns a creature from your graveyard to play, this is a self-enabler. And there's a few of them, but they're all at rares. So if you pick up a rare reanimate spell, this becomes a high priority for you. Otherwise, it's a fine finisher. It's not something you need to worry about getting too much, and you want maybe 1 or 2 copies in your deck, because it's usually going to be a swamp cycling card. All right, up next we have Ichor Drinker. A 1 mana 1/1 lifelink is great because you can put little counters on it. There's lots of ways to make it a little bit bigger. You can also make a body with it. So this is 2 mana for 2 rectangles. That's how it parses out. 1 mana 1/1 that turns into an artifact 2/2, which you can incubate later. But the black deck really wants creatures that are multiple bodies for 1 card, and this is that. Is it Ichor? I always called it Ichor. But I also learned the word in the year 2000 when Mirrodin came out. I loved those books. Not year 2000, it was 2003-ish, maybe 2004. Ichor Shade. It's a 3 mana 2/3, beginning of your end step. It grows if something died, but it doesn't have to witness the death. If anything died, you can play it afterwards. Ideally, you want this to be a 3/4 the turn you play it. If you have a deck that can reliably do that, then it'll play at the ceiling of its 4. It's a little tough. So, but it's not impossible. If you're an aggressive deck, you can attack your 2/2 into their 2/2. They'll block, you'll trade, and this will be a 3/4. Once it's down, it's a little bit harder to grow, but if you can get 2 counters on it, you're pretty happy. It's a solid play. It'll get cut a lot, but like, you're not going to be too upset if you've got a few of them in your 3-drop slot. Maybe I'll raise it, but we'll have to play with it. I'm putting a revisit note in. All right, up next we have Injector Crocodile. This is just an efficient threat. Like it's a swamp cycler. It's a little bit better than the last one because it's much easier to play at 6 mana, especially because the 6th of it is coming from the swamp cycling. And it's nice having, when you pay 6 mana for a creature, it's nice not having it die into nothing. When this card trades with another 5/5, or when they play a kill spell on it, you get to incubate, and that'll turn into a 3/3, and that's just good. I believe you, Kaiser. Up first, we have Invasion of Eldraine. This is the battle for black, the first battle. This card is weird because it's a 4 mana Mind Rot, but compared to all of the other battles, it doesn't help you take it down. Not in the short term. In the long term, you could argue that it does, but this doesn't create a body when it comes in. It doesn't deal with the permanent. It doesn't deal with the board at all, which means that you don't get to play this and then attack it. You don't get to play this and then attack it after one turn. You just have to play it and then take it out for some value, maybe at a later point in the game. And that's fine without being good. If you happen to be good at taking out battles, the ceiling, you will be close to reaching that ceiling of a 5. But it's a lot more work than some of the other battles. It's still a fine card. Invasionable Grotha. This card, compared to the previous one, does help. So shooting something for 3 and gaining 3, this effect is a little bit overcosted for 5, but once you take it down, you get a real threat out of it. Grandmother Ravi, she just grows and grows and grows. This is a really cool battle. It's going to be worth fighting for. So it'll take something out, probably not something huge, but something relevant out when it comes down, and then you'll have to fight, and your opponent will fight you to stop 3/3. Merciless Repurposing, I'm going to revisit this one as well. This card is just solid. This card is 8 mana, exile a creature, make a 3/3. Exiling creature at instant speed is good. You're just limited on how many you can run, and it's competing with some really good removal. But I still gave it a 4 because it's solid removal and is not a bad thing to curve out into. Yes, it can zap other battles. It says it deals 3 damage to any other target because it can't shoot itself. If it could shoot itself, that would be silly. Yes, being able to shoot other battles is really relevant. Thank you, Beard. Especially because there's a lot of like Invasion of Zendikar, which we'll talk about soon, is 3 defense and makes a 4/4 haste vigilant attacker. So like you can get an attacker for the invasion by killing a battle or by killing a creature. This is a good card. It's pretty good. I gave it a 5. Ceiling is 6. It's usually going to play near the ceiling. Repurposing is a good card. Mirrodin Avenged, this is a good way to use your extra rectangles. It's still not great. I'll probably... Like, it's not bad, right? It's Blade Brand, and there's cards that care about prowess. I think I need to raise the effort a little bit. Yeah, we're going to raise the effort from low to medium. Mostly it's just fine. You're not going to be too happy to play this. There's better tricks. I should probably do it too. I just like this card. I love the art on it. Wait. What's he doing? He didn't kill Elesh Norn. The art's really good in this set. I was confused because Karn didn't kill Elesh Norn. Why did Karn take Elesh Norn's head off of her body? I'm just I'm wondering what's happening here. I'm sure it's something relevant. We talked about the Elspeth Smite where she killed Elesh Norn. Maybe. I like this art though. There's some really good art in this set. All right, up next we've got an Izumi Freewheeler. So this card is a little bit harder to parse than some of the other transform cards because it's harder to transform. 6 mana is a lot to transform this card. 4 mana 3/3 with Menace is almost good enough. 4 mana 3/3 with Menace that mills each player 3 cards is really relevant because there's a lot of cards that care about cards in each player's graveyard in black. I like this card a lot. I gave it a 4 with a floor of 3 and a ceiling of 6, and it flips into the Hideous Flesh Wheeler, which is an amalgamation of motorcycle and rat. It is a creature Phyrexian rat. A 4/5 with Menace is a significant upgrade to a 3/5 with Menace in this format because your opponent is very likely to have 2 2/2 creatures. And your opponent, there are 6 cards in the graveyard fresh, so you're very likely to have something to bring back with it. You need something good. If this makes a 2/2 or 1/1 Death Touch, then you're pretty happy with it. You really do want that body. You want to be able to transform this and get something relevant out of the transformation. I think you might be right, Beard. I'm pretty sure Elesh Norn was killed by Elspeth. I don't have the white set review open. All right, up next we have Nezumi Informant. This card, if you don't have a way to use the rectangle, it's just fine. If your opponent discards a card and then you can feed this to something, you're really happy. Card's solid. That ceiling is for when you have good things to sacrifice, good uses for the body, and it's also why I like Mirrodin Avenged. I think you can make a really solid little black value deck with Mirrodin Avenged and Nezumi Informants. Your opponent is not as incentivized to block it, but they are incentivized to attack a lot if they're playing battles. Oh, that makes sense, Ninja. I haven't finished the story yet. Rats do like their motorbikes. I love this card because it's Ravenous Rats, right? He's evolved, but he's still a Ravenous Rat. Oh, thank you. All right, I'll read that a little later. I'm still only on like story 5. Up next, Phyrexian Gargantua. 6 mana, 4/4, draw 2 cards, lose 2 life. Card is solid. The problem with the Gargantua compared to other formats is it doesn't really stabilize you. Like, those 2 cards are great, but you're not going to get to play them that turn, and losing 2 life that turn is a problem, especially if your opponent has just played a 6 mana 6/5 trample, or a 6 mana 7/7 with menace, or a 6 mana 5/5 even. There's a lot of 5 and 6 mana 5/5s in this set, and it's wild. This card has been so good every other time it's been printed. Now it's just fine, and it's not the 6 drop you always want, but the heavier control decks with the cheaper removal want this card. It's solid. Render Inert. This card kills flat out 19 out of all 20 battles in this set, at least at common, uncommon. Killing a battle, drawing a card is relevant, especially because it's not, so like comparing this to like Disenchant, draw a card. If this were Disenchant, draw a card, you would be dependent on your opponent playing artifacts and enchantments. But with Render Inert, you get to be the one to play the battles. You get to pack your deck full of battles that Render Inert kills, and then kill them and draw a card, and kill them even if your opponent, killing a battle with a card like this is going to feel devastating, because you will often have a battle that transforms into a relevant creature on your opponent's side, and your opponent will give up a whole attack in order to leave blockers back for the battle. And then you get to Render Inert and attack them with the battle and draw a card. I think this card's really good. The floor is a 2 because obviously you have to build with a lot of battles, and the ceiling is a 6 in case you have a lot of battles. You really want like 4 or 5 battles for this card to be good, and that is really good. I like this card. I don't think there's any battle you're upset about hitting with this. There are also a lot of cards which we'll talk about as we go, but like some cards, like there are non-battle cards like Corruption of Tawashi. You're happy just hitting the Incubate token and drawing a card with it. So like it's not purely for battles, it's mostly for battles though. I like it. This card is really cool. Scornblade Berserker. So this is a 1 mana 0/1 that lets you sacrifice another creature to draw a card. So it's a bad Village Rites if you want it to be. More likely, this is going to be put a +1/+1 counter on a creature, block something, sack it to draw a card. And that's just efficient. I like this card a lot. Sometimes you're just going to play it as a 1-drop, put the counter on itself, and leave it around to convoke a little later or sack a little later. This card has multiple modes, and when one of the modes is cycling, that usually makes it good, especially if you can cycle it after it did its thing. Render Inert does kill most Planeswalkers, but I haven't looked at the Planeswalkers yet in this set, Night Dark. Usually, if there were common and uncommon Planeswalkers, I'd count them up. I don't know what percentage of Planeswalkers it kills. This is the best jump blocker, and it's set with some really good jump blockers. Card's really good. Seer of Stolen Sight is this might be a jumpstart card. I just learned from Springbok. 124. Yeah, anything over 300 is a jumpstart card, so we're gonna go ahead and remove this card, which is too bad because it's a cool card. All right, Tenured Oilcaster. This card is a lot like Sheoldred's Head Cleaver in the last set. It doesn't do enough outside of its archetype, and if you can get it into its archetype, it's fine. If this is a 4 mana 5/4 with Menace, card's great. If this is a 4 mana 2/4 with Menace, card's terrible. So, don't play it, and hopefully if you're in that archetype, you have better 4s than this. But you won't always have better 4s than this, and you'll still end up playing it in your double middle deck, and that's fine. Dramatic Revelation. I love this card. I learned today that I might be the only content creator who likes this card. I think it's fantastic because it always does what you want. So you play this on turn 2 and you take a card that they're about to play or a bomb that you're scared of. And if they don't have either of those things, if their hand is all 2/2s, you just take the Incubate and you incubate at a later date. It's great in the control decks. It's okay in the mid-range. It's okay in the it's bad in the aggro decks. It's okay in the aggro decks. I just like it. Like even it's a discard spell that turns into a 4-mana 3/3 if you top deck it in the late game, which isn't fantastic, but the fact that it's so good at so many stages of the game makes this card something that I'll probably be playing quite a few copies of. I like it. I think it's a solid card all around. I'm pretty scared of a lot of the rares, but the thing is, they are bomb rares and they're engines. The engines people can assemble are so powerful that being able to disrupt them is great. But one thing I talked about yesterday and a little bit today, playing this set is going to be all about rhythm. It's all about feeling out the tempo of what your opponent is trying to do over a few turns, whether that's from attacking down battles, flipping an incubator, flipping a transform card. Seeing their hand, I would play in this format, not in others, and not everybody would do this, but a 4-mana 3/3, that said, look at your opponent's hand, is a card I would play in this format. And that's what this is with upside, because it's spread out across multiple turns. Like if you played until turn 3 to play this, you can flip 2 incubate tokens on turn 4. I think it's very strong. Unseal the Necropolis. This is the card we're revisiting. I think it's pretty good. Cards like this tend to do better the more cheap creatures there are. There are some good cheap creatures, and both players mill 3 is upside, and being at instant speed is pretty good. I like that this is an instant speed card. It's also like being able to attack with, I mean, it's not ideal, but it'll happen. Where'd that 4-drop go? Attacking with the Tenured Oilcaster, and then saying, okay, you blocked with 2 creatures. Well, now I'm a 5/4, and I'm also going to pick up 2 cards. Is solid. This card is actively good if you make the milling of your opponent worth a card, which is work, but not terrible. Most black decks will want 1 copy of this card. If you have really good bombs, you'll want more than 1 copy of this card. Also, I'm pretty happy playing this card in a creature heavy deck if I only have 1 creature in my graveyard and just gambling for that second one. Last black card, Vanquish the Weak. I'm actually upping it to a 4 after doing the math on it, because it kills like half the creatures in the set at instant speed. I like it a lot. I'll play it, and it's better than I thought initially. That does it for black. All right, we got to do red next because that's the color order. Sorry, I don't make the rules. Wizards does. I needed the tea. Give me just a moment. Thank you, Ninja. Taking a 30-second break. I like the art for Vanquish the Weak too. I just read this story. They put a they had to send a Traxa because angels are less weakened by the halo, and she was an angel. I love this flavor text though. When Traxa first arrived, the people of New Capenna rejoiced at the sight of such a grand angel. Then the slaughter began. Alright, I'm going to take 30 seconds without talking to drink this tea a little bit. But Luna, explain why Break the Rules makes them from Canada. Also, hey Luna! That's no. Oh my god, you're right, Homebrew. Wait, is Mind Splice instant non-creature spell, or is it instant and sorcery? Hey Kokodon, how's it going? Oh, I'm so sorry, Homebrew. You might still play him in the same deck. Let's apply the chat over teensy bit. Alright, up next is red. You got here just in time. We've got the red commons and uncommons and the blue commons and uncommons. Oh, we did the blue. We got red and then green. Alright, so up next we have Aki Scrap Chomper. This card's solid, and I actually like the first copy a lot. The first time I read this card, I thought it was Artifact Creature, and I wasn't too happy. The thing is, you actually need your lands in this format. It's hard to create a game state where you have spare lands. You can build a deck around having spare artifacts. I'm actually raising the ceiling of this card because if you have enough cards that generate treasures, you're happy feeding them to the Scrap Chomper. And a 1 mana 1/1 is not quite good enough most of the time. I'm raising this. I just talked myself up because there are Convoke cards. So 1 mana 1/1 in red lets you Convoke. It's solid. There's ways to grow it. This is a 1 mana 1/1 that is not terrible in the late game. It's solid and like you don't usually want to play it, but it's got a high enough ceiling that I'm willing to give it a shot. Just munching lands and treasures seems fine. It's slow and you want to have Convoke cards to go with it. All right, next we've got the Axeguard Artisan. I just realized that this might also be a Jumpstart card. I don't know how that happened. Looks like we got one Jumpstart card in every color. Gotta delete it. Bad. I liked this card. I was looking forward to drafting it. But I'm realizing that the cards with the white corners are Jumpstart cards. Beamtown Beatstick. All right, 1 mana equipment is fine. It's not great. Equipping for 2 is fine. It's not great. Making a treasure is really good in this format, especially because you just gave it something menace. There's a lot of red and black creatures that you can eat those treasures and do something relevant with them. So this is not... You're capped a little bit on how many pump spells you can run that aren't instant speed, on how many tricks you can run. But I'm happy to play a copy or two of a given equipment, and this is a good one. You can turn the treasures you make with the Beamtown Beatstick into real, strong, relevant cards. Yeah, sacrificing the land makes it playable. When I thought it was just artifact or creature, I'm like, yeah, it's fine. But it's solid. It's a solid card. All right. Burning Sun's Fury. The problem with this card is even though it's essentially a free spell, if you have 2 1/1s and your opponent blocks them with 2 2/2s, well, it's still a 3 for 2. You get to take out 2 creatures of theirs and 2 of your creatures die. If you are aggressive enough to use this as a pure burn spell, it's fine because then it's a 2 mana Convoke spell that deals 4 damage. But it's a little awkward because a lot of the times with Convoke, you'll play maybe a creature. So like, in a given game of Convoke, you might have a 3-drop on turn 4. You'll play your 3-drop, and then you'll tap that 3-drop to also cast Burning Sun's Fury in the same turn. Well, Burning Sun's Fury wants to target the creature you just played to give it haste. So you need a lot of creatures to actually get this at a reasonable rate. It's still a fine card in the active Convoke deck. If you have rares or uncommons that care about casting Convoke spells, then you can play this, but you're not going to run it too often. What? Oh my god, you're right. The Scrap Chomper is eating Sensei's Divining Top. And that's an Okagami. Not Okagami. Uba Mask. That's an Uba Mask. Yeah. Like, it's not unplayable. It averages 2. It's work to get it up to that ceiling of a 4. But you can get it up there. You just need the right stuff. There are rares that make this card good, but there's only one uncommon that makes this card good, and one common that makes this card good, and there are better interactions with it. Up next, coming in hot, it's a reasonable pump spell. There aren't quite enough death touchers that you need to worry too much. It doesn't force enough combat wins unless you already have a lot of creature spells, but there are cards that care about prowess and care about casting instants, and this card is fine in those decks. It's not the removal spell you want, it's not the pump spell you want, but you'll still play it. This is also a Jumpstart card. Come on. All right, Fearless Scout. This is just efficient. A 5 mana 4/3 with double strike is fine. A 5 mana 3/2 with double strike that puts a counter on something else and gives it double strike for the turn will often win you a game. Just grabbing a flyer. So like, if this were only ever get in for 8 points of damage, then that wouldn't be amazing. But if it were, because it lets a 2/2 flyer take out a 6 defense battle, it lets you set up some solid turns. And also, red cares about backup, and you get to duplicate backup abilities a lot of the time. So, I think it's the red-white signpost lets you duplicate backup abilities. Mirror Shield Hoplite. Whenever a creature you control becomes a target of a backup ability, copy that ability. So, being able to give this a counter and giving 2 things double strike is good. This is a solid card. You want to have, it's a ceiling of 5 in the backup deck. Otherwise, it's going to be often a 3 unless you have flyers to give it to it. But usually you will have something to give this backup counter to that is relevant. Ideally, you have some battles to go with it. It's a good card. Furnace Gremlin. I like this card. So the floor is a 2 because it's kind of a mana sink, but very often you just want a 2 mana 1/2. So in the mid game, you will usually want to play this card as a 2 mana 1/2 that dies to make any sort of artifact, because then you can eat it and then you can also eat the artifact. In the late game, chances are this is going to trade up. You will get to pump it twice to trade with a 3/3 or 3 times to trade with a 4/4 and then make a 4/4 of your own. This card is pretty efficient and better than it looks. I gave it a floor of 2 because that's the worst it can play, but I'm actually raising that to a 3, and it'll usually play closer to a 4. I like this card. Furnace Host Charger. So this is a really cool land cycling card. I gave it a 4 because you don't have to be red to play this card. Like, you can be a green-blue deck and play 3 copies of this card, and it'll get you your reds. You will have decks, I will play decks at least, all the time, which splash for a red rare using 3 Furnace Host Chargers. I just like it. I like the single pip land cycling cards. Even if it's a little bit underrated, the fact that it can be either a mountain or a 5/5 haste in any deck makes this card solid. Yeah, they're really good. There's only a few of them, Beard. Burnt Rains. This is one of the best. This is possibly the best a threaten's ever been. Involuntary Servitude out of Streets of New Capenna was really close. But this card is just good. You get to threaten a relevant creature, hit either your opponent or the battle for a card and a treasure, and then there's a lot of good ways to sacrifice this. So if you have a sack outlet for this card, chances are it's sacrifice it, draw a card, which means this deals with any threat. You get all of the dies triggers. You can turn that treasure into another relevant card, and you can turn the creature you stole into a relevant card. Yeah. How did I do that? But yes, this is very good. This is excuse me. This is a really strong threat, and it's essentially 2 mana if you need it to be, because it makes a treasure when it hits, and they don't want to have to sacrifice a creature to block it, raising the ceiling to a 7. Yeah, the floor of a 3 is when it's only a threaten, and that's not going to happen too often. Yeah, threatens are good in this set. Anger Scrounger. I like this card. This is a good use of backup. It's a 3 mana. The core of this is a 3 mana 3/2, and it's not when it attacks, it's when it becomes tapped, which means if you use it to pay for a convoke or crew a vehicle, then you still get to rummage. And if you play this card on turn 3, I drank too much tea and it went down the wrong pipe. But I'm fine. Thanks, Jinx. So you can play this card, give another creature backup, tap both of them to play a Stoke the Flames or a Convoke spell, and rummage twice. Card gets very good in the Convoke deck, to the point that I'm raising the ceiling to a 5, because this card is really good in the Convoke deck. It's really good when paired with some of the rare vehicles. Also, look at him. He's so excited. He's like, look, I found something that I need to deal with this portal in the sky. Harried Artisan. This is one of the few cards that it's like fine to play and transform in the same turn. 3 mana 2/3 haste is fine. 6 mana 3/4 haste is with flying is fine. And the fact that it can be either makes it a good card all around. Lytus gathered his prototype and fled. This is one of the Phyrexians I'm kind of happy for. He's like just a guy who wants to fly, and now he can fly. Does that work? Yeah, this is just a solid card. It flips well. It's a 3/4 flying haste for 6 mana, or a 2/3 haste on the ground for 3 mana, and turn 3 casting it, turn 4 transforming it is fine. All right, Invasion of Mercadia. This card is good. 2 mana for it's a Tormenting Voice. Oops, I forgot to give it an effort value. So this is one of those set it and forget it kind of. They set it and forget it battle. You play it on turn 2. You filter your cards. Great. Later on, this will turn into a relevant body. It's a 3/3 that pumps your team. Like, you get to turn a card into 2 bodies, which also grows your team. Flipping this card is so strong. You will get more than 4 damage. That you get 4 damage the turn you get this card. So like when you flip this, you cast a 3/3, which will then deal 4 damage the next turn. So it's always worth flipping when you can, unless your opponent has a removal spell for a creature. But even then, you already got your value out of this card. It's a good card all around. This is irrelevant to the Spell Shapers from Mercadia. If you weren't playing back then, cards like Waterfront Bouncer. The Spell Shapers were all creatures that could cast a spell. So in this case, the spell cast is Heroic Reinforcements for only 3 mana. Really good. The other battle for this set is Invasion of Regatha. I don't know that we've been here before. This card's fine. Oh, I didn't actually rate it. I gave it a 5, and that's because chances are you can get 2 creatures out of it, but it's not going to do that much better. You want this to be in a heavy battle deck, but that's what you already are. So like, you build this into a heavy battle deck, you're going to be really happy to have it because it clears out a small blocker. Chances are they're going to have a small blocker that you want to kill for only 3 mana, and you can use it to kill another battle and start your chain of flipping battles. It's a pretty good one. It also combos with itself. If you get a fewer Invasion of Regatha, well, your first one only deals 4 damage, but then you flip it, and your second one will deal 6 damage to a battle and 3 damage to a creature, and then your third one will deal 8 damage to a battle and 5 damage to a creature, and then it gets, then you've won. You've won at that point. Very good, chains well. Oh, thank you. Almost. Hope it hasn't been like that the whole time. My bad. That looks right. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize you couldn't see the battles. Yeah, so here's Invasion of Mercadia. That one's only 2 mana. And this is just Tormenting Voice. Like the front side of this card is the Tormenting Voice exactly. Which that would be a 3, but it's usually going to play closer to a 7. Because flipping this thing is nuts. Nostalgia, I literally played Spirits for 2 days. Alright. Alright, Invasion of Regalia is a great card. Next we've got Karsus Depth Guard. I actually like this card because it's a good blocker, which you can convoke until you can grow it. It's better in certain color combinations, and there's a few, you kind of want some equipment to go with it, but it's mostly just going to be solid. You can cast which card without using it, Kokodon? Oh, you can also just shoot your opponent with the invasion. It's pretty good. And you can cast invasion without pitching a card. You usually want to pitch a card, but it's nice sometimes because sometimes you aren't going to have a card to pitch. Not a great feeling, but it'll happen. Karsus Depth Guard, 3 mana 4/3 defender, tends to trade up. It's a good body for Convoke, and you can attack with it. Later on, you'll just need a card to go with it. It's not hard to make this an attacker just because backup is strong. So in the backup decks or in the decks where you already have a few equipment, it's pretty good. You do have to think about running it. Like, it's not a free card to run, but you'll have decks with, you'll lose to people who are running like 3 of these and then pump the team. Or like, eventually somebody will have 2 Karsus Depth Guards, and they will play a Burning Sun's Fury, and you'll just die. Alright, up next we've got Kenris Spellspear. Card is ruthlessly efficient. It's a solid body, Jinx. Yeah. Alright, Kenris Spellspear, 2 mana 2/2 Trample Prowess. That would be good enough on its own. That would be a 4. If this card never flips, it's a 4. If it flips, it's pretty good. Trample, Ward 2, Prowess, Prowess. I love this. How have we not seen more cards with Prowess, Prowess? Or Prowess, Prowess, Prowess? Or Prowess, 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 Prowess? I would play the hell out of those. But yeah, Prowess, Prowess, Trample, Ward 2, really good. Your opponent will never be able to block this with a 3/3 happily. You can, if you have 4 lands in hand and 5 lands untapped, and your opponent has a 3/3 and a 2/2 in play, they're not going to be able to block this safely. They're not going to think, oh, I can just block I can trade my 3/3 here. If their opponent has a 4/4, they're not going to be able to block this. This card is really good. This is one of the, I think this is the best flip card we've seen. It's good aggressively, and it's even if you're tapped out, your opponent can't block this because of Convoke. Very good. So Prowess is whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. That includes anything that isn't a creature, and it's the unifying mechanic of red and blue. We see it occasionally. Here, it has 2 instances of Prowess, which means that if I attack with my 3/3 and they block with a 4/4 and I lightning bolt their face, then my Spellstalker will kill their 4/4. Blocking with Prowess is a dangerous proposition. I don't think it does. Oh, actually it would. This still has +1/+1. We need Quebec. Quebec should be around here somewhere. Quebec's a judge. The Semantic Barrage. Dealing 1 damage to a creature or planeswalker, not good enough. Dealing 5 damage for 1 mana is fantastic. This is a sideboard card. The 4 is actually a 1, and it's usually going to play at a 2. But if you're in a best of 3 event or at your pre-release, count these. If you're not red, count these and side them in. Even if your opponent is if your opponent is a white-blue deck, you still want to side this card in, even if you're not red. And otherwise, don't play it. This is a card to be aware of for your sideboard all the times you have it. Yeah, the color hosers are really good in this set. Marauding Dreadship. I love this card. Like, first of all, it's a boat that eats people. So, this is a 3-mana 4/1. If you played a 2-drop, then this attacks for 4 with haste. If you didn't play a 2-drop, then on turn 5, you can play this, incubate, flip the incubate token, and use that to crew this creature. It's a vehicle that makes a token. It's like Eska's Chariot, but at common, it's a vehicle that crews itself. Just a solid card all around. Mirran Banesplitter are just bad. Like, it's relevant in that it's a little bit like the fan, but it doesn't ever save the creature you're putting it on. So if you have some creatures with first strike, you can make it work. If you have some creatures with big butts and low attack, you can make it work. But it's a lot of work for not a lot of payoff. Generally, this will let you trade up, and then you'll have to sack it a little bit later. If you're very aggressive or just attacking down battles, the card is fine, but it's still not going to be better than a lot of tricks. 3 equip is just a lot after it comes down. I do like it, and I'll find times to play it. Javelier. Card's pretty good because reach is pretty good in this set. It blocks a lot of 3/3s, and being able to just shoot your opponent or in a battle for 2 is a reasonable way to close a game. It's pretty nice to have access to, actually. Just because you can play it and then play a battle, pass a turn, end step, shoot the battle, untap, shoot the battle again. And it's a good blocker in the meantime. It's an efficient body. I'm raising the ceiling up to a 5 because sometimes it's going to be that good, but it's usually going to play more like a 4. Pyretic Prankster. This card's super awkward. 2-mana 2/1 is just okay, and when you flip it, it becomes a 3/2, but you don't get the trigger on it until it dies. So you need to eat it yourself. And chances are, if you wait for your opponent to just block it, then they won't actually block it. They'll just take the damage until they can't anymore. And it's pretty good if you have battles to go with it, but you need to curve out because you'll need to play the Pyretic Prankster, pay 2 life to flip it. Your opponent has to not have a removal spell, or if they have a removal spell, they need to have a creature who also dies, and then you need to have a battle that you can start attacking. It's a pretty cool card, and it's going to play interestingly. I'm actually raising the ceiling up to a 5, but it's a lot of work to get it up to that 5, and it's not always going to be worth it. You usually want to have things that care about Phyrexians and reasons that your opponent has to block this card. Ral's Reinforcements. This card is really good in this format. 2 1/1s are relevant bodies for blocking, but also there's Convoke. Getting 2 bodies from 1 card is difficult and rare in this set and very valuable. Remosian Greatsword. It works really well with Rowell's Reinforcements. It works well if you're making a lot of tokens, both because you can power it out on off turns with those tokens, and if you have like 6 tokens, then this card is good. Because if you have 6 1/1 tokens, you tap 5 of them for the Greatsword, pay 2 to equip it, attack for 4 with Trample, and now all of your tokens are threats. But you need to have the right deck for it, and you pretty much have to be tokens for this. Like, it's worse than the green-white ways to grow a team or the mono-green ways to grow a team. So it has a place, but it's not great. It's just outclassed by a lot of cards. Oh, thank you, Chuck. I think that means after, if it persists after it transformed, if it turns face down, it persists after it transformed. Appreciate you. Redcap Heel Slasher, 5 mana 2/3 with First Strike. It's a 4 mana 3/4 with First Strike. It's just fine. Like it's good in the backup decks, and even then it's just fine. It's usually going to be one of the last backup cards you add. It enables a few solid attacks. It's not amazing, but it does its job. Scrappy Bruiser. So I like this card. It's a 4th. It tends to enable an attack, and then you'll have to pick up whatever you attack. You play this card. I gave it a floor of 2 with a ceiling of 5, and then you can make it play towards that ceiling. I'm going to change the effort value to a medium. There's a really good enter the battlefield effect. So whether you're replaying your battles or replaying your backup creatures, there are good things to do with the Scrappy Bruiser to get value out of this card, while also having it be something that hits reasonably hard. 4 mana 3/4 body is fine, and there's a lot of, like, you can play the Scrappy Bruiser and then play the Redcap Heel Slasher to give the Scrappy Bruiser +2 First Strike, then it'll hit, and then on the next turn you can attack with both. Your Redcap Heel Slasher will be a 4/3 with First Strike, and you'll be able to pick it up and recast it again on the next turn to give Scrappy Bruiser First Strike again. So there's a lot of good little ways to get value out of the Scrappy Bruiser. Searing Barb. Deals 2 damage to any target, and that's solid, but it's at sorcery speed, which is less solid. 2 damage doesn't kill a ton of things, it kills enough. But the fact that it always turns off a blocker makes it a lot stronger, so it's good in the aggressive decks. And it's also nice having that Incubate 1. You usually won't flip the Incubate 1, you'll usually just sacrifice that artifact token. But it's good in this format. This is a... One thing I like about the aggressive decks in this format is that battles let the aggressive decks turn damage into more stronger cards. So like if your opponent is gaining a ton of life, well, now you start attacking the battles instead of your opponent. It's going to make for really interesting aggro decks. Shadow the Source. 6 mana deal 6 is fine without being great. Killing any battle is pretty useful. So if you have good battles to shatter, then you can play this card, and you'll even be able to play a battle and shatter it in the same turn pretty often. But you have to already have the battle, so I wouldn't take shatter over battles, and there's better red removal, so I wouldn't take this just to have it. Solid card, just be careful on how you play it. Being at instant speed is nice. Shivan Branchburner. Card's kind of bad. Just to break it down, it's 7 mana for a 4/4 with Flying Haste. If you tap 2 creatures, now it's a 5 mana 4/4 with Flying and Haste, but if you're an aggressive deck, you just gave up 2 attackers that you would have had. It's good in dedicated Convoke decks, but it's not the best card in dedicated Convoke decks, and hopefully you have some rares that are better than this. It's still just fine. But speaking of Convoke decks, best card in the set? It's definitely up there. So if you haven't played with Stoke the Flames before, it's always been great. In this set, it kills 93%. It kills 93% of all creatures in the set at instant speed. It kills 75% of all the battles in the set as well. At instant speed, you can play it if you have 0 lands untapped. It triggers all of the Convoke stuff. Just fantastic all around. You don't have to worry too much. This is the reason to play red. You take it first pick, you take it second pick. If you get 1 5th pick, you're red now. It doesn't matter what you had before. I know, and it's so good in this set. It's so good. I love this card. I played this card so much. Very true. 4 damage from 1 card is a lot. All right, up next, Thrashing Frontliner. Not the 2/2 you want, but a 2/2 with Trample turns all your combat tricks better. Is good in the Battles deck specifically. Is really good in the Battles deck. But you really want it to be in the Battles deck, and you usually want to pick other cards over it, like Stoke the Flames, or Shadow the Source. But like it's a 2-drop, and it's a reasonable 2-drop. If it's a 3/3 when attacks, you're very happy. You can burn the Battles, Kaiser. And you gotta be a little careful because like if you exile the Battles, you won't get to cast it. You have to deal the damage to the Battles. So like that's why Shatter the Source and Stoke the Flames are so good. Because you can just kill a battle. Like being able to just kill a battle with a card is not ideal, right? Because part of the reason that Battles are good permanents is that you get something when it comes down and you get something when it flips, and you don't want to have to spend a premium card to get that. But you will, because some of the Battles flip into crazy things. Yeah, that's exactly it though, Homebrew. Like this is a format where that happens. Blue-red in this format, you draw cards, you play burn spells. Like if you ever get enough Stoke the Flames, if you ever get enough Face Burn, then that's your game plan. Trailblazing Historian is just a 2-mana 1/3 is fine. 2-mana 1/3 with haste is fine because you can plink a battle occasionally. 2-mana 1/3 that gives something else haste to suddenly have a key attack is really good. This card is all about your key attacks and planning things ahead of time. Solid though. Volcanic Spite. 3 damage, kills 75% of all creatures in the format and a lot of the battles. And this does that in addition to filtering your card draw. This is premium red removal. Take it high when you're red, and it is a reason to go into red. I mean, Red Deck Wins just got a lot better in Constructed. Red Deck Wins got better in not every format. Really just Standard, but it's really good in Standard. And it's good in some of the Prowess decks. I think Iconoclast decks are about to get really good in Standard. Yes, it is an upgrade of Fire Prophecy. Volcanic Spite is Fire Prophecy, but it can also hit Planeswalkers in battles, though it is a strict upgrade. Also, having Volcanic Spite and Fire Prophecy makes Indomitable Creativity better, because that deck wants 8 copies of that card, or probably just 6 copies of the card. In case they draw a combo piece, they need to put it on the bottom of their deck. All right, up next we have Wartrain Slasher. It's just pretty efficient. A 4-mana 4/3 with Menace is great. 4-mana 8/3 with Menace will probably trade with 2 creatures or kill a battle. This is a premium card. It's a premium attacker in the anti-battle deck. Red-green anti-battles is really good, and you'll be splashing off-color battles a lot for those. Every deck is cursed for you, Nostalgia. That means that every set makes every cursed deck better. Rends Resolve, this card is not quite as good as it has been. It's just draw 2 cards if those cards are cheap. It's some work. You got to build your deck pretty low to the ground, and this format doesn't really reward building low to the ground. But there is a red deck with all cheap cards and Rends Resolve, and it's pretty good in the Convoke deck because hitting spells that you can use your creatures to help you cast means that you are less likely to miss on it. Just a solid card all around, and not something you can play very many copies of. Okay, I gotta get more water, and then we'll move on to green. Be right back. I'm back. So this is actually never been able to do 4 sets before. Usually my stamina gives out at about 3.5. So let's see what we can do. We got this. That's exactly right, Ben. I'm on like my 8th glass of water this set review. All right, we are on green now. So green is, I think, my favorite in this set. If you watch me hit number 1 in Dominaria or Zendikar, you're going to like watching me play green this set. Let's see, I think I'm at 40 right now. So I might do a number 1 push if I find the time near the end of the month. We'll see how the early drafts for this set go. All right. So green has a few questions that you need to ask yourself while you're drafting it, because compared to all the other colors, your fixing is really good, but you also need it. So when you play green, like if you're red-green battles, then you'll need to be splashing your other battles, because the red and green battles are both, well, green battles are pretty good. The red battles are a little bit weak compared to the others when they come in. But the red-green battle deck, you'll probably have to splash a few blue-green and a few blue-red battles. The green-white counters deck, you might splash some backup cards. The green-black sack deck doesn't really need anything extra. It uses the black cards pretty well, because green has the best creatures and black has the best removal in this set. And the blue-green transform deck, you shouldn't have to splash, like you technically don't have to splash anything, but that's the kind of deck you end up in. So this is gonna feel a lot like watching me play Domain back in Dominaria. So if you're ramping, you have to decide how you're ramping, because you've got options. You have to do it either through creatures or by putting more lands into play. And if you're putting more lands into play, you'll need to put in off-colored basic lands. You do have the 10 multicolored cards and the land cyclers to aid you there. If you are doing counters, you have to decide what kind of counters. You have to figure out what your best creatures are and play to those. All right. So up first, we have Arachnoid Adaptation. This card is much better than it looks. Green does stomp. Look at this pump spell. It's 1 mana, +2/+2, untap it, and reach. We've seen 1 mana green pump spells really overperform in the past. I think that's going to be really similar in this set, because combat is so important. This will often just be untap a creature, kill a 2/2 flyer, kill a Windrake, kill a 3/3. There's so many good reasons to play this card. Only 1 mana to kill something important is good. I think this is one of the better pump spells in the set. I will probably play a deck at least once with 4 of these. Up next, we've got, it's going to take people to catch on to. If you pick Arachnoid Adaptations early and play with them, you will win early drafts. And if you don't, I don't know, I can't give you money back on this. But yes, this card is really good. Like, your opponent will be actively trying to attack, and it's so difficult to play around a single green mana. Atrax's Fall. Destroy target artifact, enchantment, creature with flying, or battle. So when you kill a battle, you don't defeat the battle. So you have to deal the damage to the battle. And your opponent will have already gotten, so like you can kill a battle that your opponent gives to you, but they'll have already gotten the end of the battlefield effect. But this has a lot of targets, and being able to kill an incubate token or a disabling enchantment or a battle means that your first copy of this card is something you're pretty happy to play. White has enchantments, blue has flyers, green and red have battles, and red has artifacts. So you will have targets for Atrax's Fall, but they won't always be good targets. You're usually going to want the first copy of this card, and it has diminishing returns after that. Everything's the bane of everything. You get used to it, Jinxie. Up next, Blighted Burgeoning. Card's fine. I actually like it because you can play this. So comparing it to like Weirding Wood or Grafted Growth out of the last set, we see this effect a lot. We see this effect a lot of 3 mana, fix colors, ramp, and do the set mechanic. Now in this case, yes, this card is better in sealed than it is in draft, but it's still playable in draft. It has diminishing returns, but it's nice because like Grafted Growth, you need to have a 2-drop to get full value out of Grafted Growth. But with Blighted Burgeoning on turn 4, you can play it on a land, incubate, and then flip the incubate into a 2/2 that same turn, which is not a great play, but like it does add a little bit of extra dimension to the Blighted Burgeoning. One important thing to note about the Burgeoning, it only gives you 1 new color. So it doesn't say Enchanted Land has tap, add two of any one color. It gains the ability to create an additional mana. So it doesn't let you splash double pipped cards. Yeah, this does let you splash a lot of bombs though. It's solid. You don't want too many, and you want to be able to ramp to 5 or 6. All right, Bond and Herd Beast. Card's just fine. Like 5 mana is just a lot for a 4/5, and there's really good 5 drops. And 9 mana is a lot for a 7/5 with Menace. But a 7/5 with Menace will necessitate, like, it'll trade. Like 9 mana is not what you want to be paying into a card that just trades with 2 3/3s. But it works well with pump spells, and it's not like, this isn't a terrible body. This card's a 3 because it's filler. You're gonna be looking for better 5 drops, but it does its job. Chomping Kabu. This is one of the better backup creatures because removing your opponent's ability to chump block a creature is just good. But a 4 mana 4/4 with this ability is also good. This is a good card. Just a 4 mana 4/4 is good in Magic. One time I did the Great Designer search, and one of the questions was, why are 4 mana 4/4 so good? Which is still a question I'm struggling to answer, but it was their essay. I got to part 3. All right, up next we have the Converter Beast. So this, at its core, reads 4 mana, and you incubate 2. So it is a 6 mana 5/6. And that's not quite good enough on its own, but it is spread across 2 bodies and spread across 2 turns. So you can turn 4, make an 0/1, which is not ideal, but it chump blocks, and then turn 5, flip it and play another spell. The reason that I gave this a 3 with a ceiling of a 5, there are ways to blink cards in this format. So Converter Beast with a pile of scroll shifts is a way to win the game, or just ways to recur the Converter Beast, or even cards like we just looked at that Brawler. I lost the Brawler. So something like, I don't know where it went. Here it is, Scrappy Bruiser. So Scrappy Bruiser with this card, picking it up makes another 5/5. Being able to blink it makes another 5/5. So it's a lot of work, but you can put the work in. And what will happen a lot of the time is, like, you'll take a scroll shift over this Converter Beast, and then you'll get the Converter Beast last pick. Because if it's just on rate, it's only fine. It also interacts really positively with a lot of the multicolored cards. So if we go over to, like, the black-green multicolored card, making that into a 10/10 is pretty relevant, even if it's another 5 mana. And you can go turn 3 Vat Keeper, turn 4 Converter Beast, turn 5, turn the Incubate token into a 10/10 and attack in that same turn. Solid card, it takes some work to make good, but you will be rewarded for putting that work in. Copperhose Crusher, 8 mana, 8/8, trample hexproof. Good finisher, hard to kill. Freeze Death Touch is fine. This is just how green decks will win. I gave it a ceiling of a 7 because there's really good ways to ramp this out. You can get this out turn 6 without too much work, turn 5 with too much work. Solid card, I'm kind of glad it's back. I like having big hexproof tramplers as ramp payoffs, because, like, it's hard to find good payoffs to playing lands, to playing extra lands, to playing extra sources of mana. This is a good payoff. Cosmic Hunger. This card is just so strong in this format. Like, bite, when you can bite a battle, to flip it is good. It just is a good card. There's going to be a lot of creatures. You'll find a lot of opportunities to play it. It's a very strong bite spell. I think green's my pick for strongest color of this format. Possibly white, blue as a combination. But by itself, I think green is the strongest color. Next, we have Crystal Carpus. It's not great, but I tend to have a soft spot for anything with cycling, just because either this card is going to do something or you can cycle it. You won't always have time to cycle it, because you will be, when you have 2 spare mana, you will usually be incubating. And I'll side this in against people with low removal or people with bad removal. Because sometimes people will pivot late, or they will have bad cards and their removal will be 6 mana or a 5 mana enchanted creature gets -4/-4. And that ward 2 will make all the difference. And also playing this on a creature that already has ward is going to feel really good. But it doesn't let you, like, if this gave ward and trample, I'd be really happy to play this card, but chances are, if you just play this on your 5/5, your opponent will chump block it for the turn and it won't matter. Card's just fine. I'm not usually going to play it, but I will occasionally. I just found out this is a jumpstart card, which is good because it's pretty bad in this format. Verdlin's Favor. This is a really cool card. So you target player searches for a land, target creature gets +2/+2 or 2+1/+1 counters. This card is only good when you get something out of both of those. But I actually went back and raised this because I had it at a 2 before, and then I raised it up to a 3 because there are a lot of good 6 drops and 7 drops and 8 drops and reasons to play this on people's end step. So even if you're not using this as a trick, so ideally you want this to be a 2-for-1, right? You want to block your opponent's 3/3 with your 3/3, put 2 counters on it and get a land. And in a lot of sets, that would be bad because that land doesn't do enough at that stage of the game. Like going from a turn where you would have had 5 mana to 6 mana doesn't do enough. But there's so many good mana sinks and so many ways to use that land that this is worth 2 cards and you can get it to be worth 3 cards. I like it. So I gave it a 3 with a floor of 2, but you can get it up to that ceiling of 5 if you're ramping or getting extra colors that you need. Not Void Hermit. This card is just very efficient. 4 mana 4/4 is good enough. 4 mana 4/4 that turns into a 5/5 is great. 4 mana 4/4 that turns into a 5/5 that also gives +4/+4 to your 1/1 is really good. And if you are attacking with an Incubate, if you have an Incubate 5, then you attack it, it changes the base power. So if something has 5+1/+1 counters on it and is a 0/0, well now it's a 5/5 with 5+1/+1 counters and it's a 10/10. This card is really efficient on both sides, and you even get extra just massive size from it. Herbology Instructor, a little bit weaker than the previous transform card, still quite good. It's 2 mana 1/3 that gains you 3 life, is a great blocker. It keeps you alive with a little bit of life gain, and it's just fine until the late game when it flips and kills a creature. So 7 mana or 6 mana and 2 life is a lot to be worth flipping a card, but you're fine just holding on to this card until the late game until it becomes a kill spell as well. Efficient 2-drop for more defensive decks and a payoff for ramping. If you grow, you can also grow it. Like if you put 2 counters on it, then giving something -5/-5 kills a lot more. Even just 1 extra power will let this kill significantly more creatures. All right, Green Sagas. Let me make sure you can read these. Looks like you can read. I need some water. I'm starting to lose my voice just a little bit. All right, so this card is solid. It's Hunt the Weak +1 mana. So it's 5 mana. Great, thanks, Night Dark. It's 5 mana. You grow a creature and it fights a creature. That's going to be relevant most of the time. And then it flips into a 4/4 and it's 6 power and 6 noctis. But 6 battle, this is the only 6 defense battle at common or uncommon, and it's a pretty big difference in this format. 6 defense is a very different, is a big difference. It's a significantly more than 5. It's a big jump in how difficult it is to deal with it. I also love this card. Like, look at this tiny little ooze. Look at this big ooze. We haven't gotten to Muragondra yet, but I'm excited to. So it is important to note, Primordial Plasm is a pretty good card because it doesn't have to attack to have a relevant ability. If you have a flyer, you can target your opponent's flyer to make it not a flyer anymore and then attack in the air. Or you can just make your own creature a little bit bigger. This one does help you flip it. Like if you have a 5/5 in play, sometimes you'll get to fight your 6/6 from the counter to their 5/5 and attack it down, and it'll be a fine card. Like it's still a good card. I gave it a 4. That ceiling of a 5 is just if you're curving into that really efficiently, but you can build a deck that curves really efficiently. There's a lot of 4 mana 4/4s that just the Invasion of Muragondra fights into. You just need a way to deal a little bit of extra damage to it. Invasion of Zendikar, this might be the best saga at uncommon. Or battle, sorry. This is one of the better battles. We weren't sure. So this is one of the first cards that was spoiled, but Explosive Vegetation is just great in this format. Getting 2 lands for 4 mana, you don't have to be a ramp deck for both of those lands to be relevant. There's a lot of good things to flip. There's a lot of good ways to use all of your mana throughout the whole game. And it's fragile. It's only got 3 defense. There's cards that just deal 3 damage. Like there's multiple. So in red, this card dies to Stoke the Flames. It dies to Volcanic Spite. I mean, of course, it dies to like Shatter the Source. But even just hitting it for 2 with Searing Barb is almost kills it. There's a lot of good ways. This one's really easy to attack down, and you get a strong body, which means like if your opponent is tapped out or can't quite block, if you have a 3/3 flyer and you turn 4 Invasion of Zendikar and then attack it with your 3/3, then it turns into a 4/4. You have another mana right now, and then you get to untap with 7 mana in play. You just jumped from 4 mana to 8 mana in the course of 1 turn, which means a turn 3 Invasion of Zendikar will result in a turn 4 8/8 hexproof trample. It's very strong, and I'll be first picking it a lot. I'll even be splashing it. I think this card's really good. Next, we have Iridescent Blademaster. Not a lot to say. It's a 2 mana 2/2 that the threat of activation is so strong. So like I can attack my Iridescent Blademaster into your 3/3, and you can't block if you're trying to defend a battle. Just because of that threat of activation. 4 mana for +2/+2 isn't ideal, but it's really good. It's one of the best green 2-drops. Next, we have Kami of Whispered Hopes. This card kind of has to be in a counters deck. You need to be putting counters on other things, because this is only a 3 mana dork that makes you a mana. That's not good enough. But a 3 mana dork that, if you back it up 1 time, becomes a 3/3. Now it makes 3 mana. You can put counters on other things. It suddenly combos with so many different cards. So I gave it a floor of 2 with a ceiling of 6, and it's usually going to be playing somewhere between those. Oh, thanks, Night Dark. I love Saga's Alex. Neon Dynasty was my favorite draft set. This is looking good. This might be an all-timer. I think this is an all-timer of a set. I need to look at all the rares before I make that judgment for sure, but I think this set's an all-time. All right, up next, we have Overgrown Pest. It's not quite Contagious Vorak. It's still quite good. This ends up being a 3 mana 2/2 draw card most of the time. In any other set, I would have put that at a 5, but I'm putting it at a 4 because a 3 mana 2/2 does not fight well enough on turn 3. There's so many 3 mana 3/3s and 3 mana Wind Drakes. It doesn't block for battles quite well enough, but it is all around solid. 3 mana 2/2 that replaces itself is just good. Portent Tracker. I like this card. It's a 2 mana dork that also slowly deals with battles or slowly builds up your own battles. You want this card is good when you have battles, you fear battles, and you have more 4-drops than 3s, because ramping from 2 to 4 mana on turn 3 is why this card is really good. Placid Rottentail. 1 mana 1/1 with Vigilance. Really good in the counters deck. Fine and playable everywhere else. If you have the countered interactions, this card is so strong. It just keeps attacking. And like, if this were a 1/1 normally, like we've seen this card before. It's a really good Rabbit, Ben. So if this were just a 1 mana 1/1 without Vigilance, then your opponent would just take 1 every turn, or or just not attack you. But this attacks every turn until your opponent decides to kill it, and then you get to draw something else. Also, I love this artwork. It's so good. This is a really good card. I gave it a floor of 2 with a ceiling of 5, but it's not that hard to get it up to that ceiling. You want it in the counters deck most. But it's also not something you're upset about sacking to the black deck. Maybe I should raise it. I just gave all the greens really high ratings. I think green is so strong. Oh, I actually made a note to raise the value of this next card. Oh, I already did. Never mind. Yeah, it's a great card. All right, Ravenous Sailback, really good. It's a 5 mana 3/4, kills target incubate token, or is a 3/4 haste to attack a battle. It's usually going to be what you want it to be. I think it's very strong. It always does something relevant if you build your deck right. Here's one of the reasons that the Kami is good. It's Kami plus Rune. Oh, this is not a real card, damn it. I was really excited to play with this card. This is a Jumpstart card. We can't draft it. Sandstalker Moloch. For some reason, they made the Color Hosers really good for some people. So a 3 mana 4/2 flash will play like a removal spell. You play it out as a blocker, or you play it on your opponent's end step to attack down a battle, and it's going to be pretty good. If you manage to draw a card off this, you're going to win the game. It's so good. This is a really strong uncommon, and you play this card even if your opponent isn't blue and black. You just run it. You play this card main deck even if your opponent isn't blue or black. And then if they aren't blue or black, you side it out. Because the downside of being a 3-mana 4/2 flash is fine. The upside of drawing a card, from a relevant card from your top 4 cards, is so high. Seed of Hope, card's bad. It's a cantrip that can miss, and that's bad. You don't want your cantrips to be able to miss. You might side it in if you happen to be a deck that is 90% permanence anyway, and has bombs, and has cards with prowess that care about non-creature spells, and has cards that care about things in the graveyard, and green doesn't have any of those by itself. So it's hard to have all of those things, and it's generally a bad card. Serpentblade Assassin. I actually came way up on this card. I had it a lot lower. And then I realized, so it doesn't have synergies. It doesn't have a creature that you can give a counter and then ping. But giving a creature a counter and then staying behind to trade with another creature is solid. Not a lot to say about it. Like, it tends to just do the thing. I'm actually lowering it down to a 3. Now, I'm still torn on this card. We're just going to leave it at 4 and give it a revisit note. All right, Storm the Seed Core. I find this artwork just stunning. It's biblical. It's such... it does not keep the Death Touch. It always has Death Touch, but with backup, it only grants Death Touch for 1 turn. Which, if it gave a Death Touch counter card, would be great. But yeah. But wow, this card is so pretty. This is a scene from a holy text about whatever this event was. It's really good though. Like, this card will play like Overrun, so 4 mana to give 4 creatures +1/+1, Vigilance and Trample is good on its own. But this card doesn't fall off if you only have 1 or 2 creatures. It's like, the options on this is Overrun with options. Very strong. It'll win you the game often. Green needs a way to crack through, and this is a good way to do it. And I also might be giving it a higher grade because of the artwork. I love this artwork. It's so cool. Even the little jackal here is doing the stabbing. Look at them all stabbing as a team. So can Ren not walk on her own? Is that Jora? Very cool. All right, up next we've got Streetwise Negotiator. Oh, see, this makes sense to me, Ben. All right, Streetwise Negotiator. This is a 2-mana 3/3. You back up itself, it's a 2-mana 3/3. You back up something else, it's a 2-mana 2/2 that puts a counter somewhere. We see this card a lot as a 2-mana 1/1 that puts a counter on something. 1 extra power weapons is a lot. It doesn't have a lot of crazy cards to interact with. It's just efficient in its stats. It's very good. Random Takedown. This card is at its worst a 1-for-1 instant speed removal spell that kills a creature or planeswalker or bat. At its best, it is a 3-for-3 because you get to turn 2 relevant, like you attack 2 1/1s into 2 2/2s, pump them both. Your 1/1s now trade up with the 2/2s and kill a relevant card. Yeah, no, I've seen Ren in 7 and Ren in 6. I didn't realize that she was unable to walk, but that's cool. That's really cool. This card is really good. Green's removal is so strong. Tangled Skyline. This card reads like Thragtusk. So it's 7 mana for a 5/5 with reach that gains you 5 life. But making it 5/5 and gaining, you don't feel so bad having to wait a turn to flip your incubate token if you just gained 5 life. You do have to be a little bit careful about battles, and you probably want some other 5-drops to go with this. But this card is really good, and giving all your Phyrexians reach is actually really important and relevant in this format. A good card. You'll be running this if you're green, but you'll also be splashing it if you're like a black-white incubate deck. Solid card all around. Up next, we've got Timberland Ancient. It's the 4 cycling card. 6 mana, 6/5 is not a great body, but the reach is nice. And the fact that you can cycle it when you don't have it is nice. The only reason that this isn't rated higher is that there are
is actual competition for good 6-drops in this. But if you don't have those 6-drops, just play the Ancient, and you'll usually be willing to play the Ancient over a 17th land anyway. Vengeant Earth. I think this card might actually be better, but I couldn't run it through any scenarios I really liked. Like, blocking a 3/3 with your 4/4 is nice, forcing your opponent to block your 4/4 is fine, but there's a real risk of just losing a land and a creature because you don't get to block and then play it as a trick. You have to play it before blockers are declared, and it's essentially 3 mana. Because you can't block with the land and then turn it into a 4/4. You have to turn it into a 4/4 before you block. If it wasn't until on a turn I played this card so much, I think that this card has a place. You don't want to have to be playing it. War Historian. I love this card. 3 mana 3/3 with reach is great in this format because chances are your opponent just played a 2 mana 2/1 or a 3 mana 2/2 or a 3 mana 2/3 with flying. And the fact that you can safely attack down battles if you are that kind of deck is great. This card is pretty strong. It can even block pigeons, Alex. AMTG. I'm sorry you got here right in the last 2 cards. Up next, we've got Wary Thespian. It's a 2 mana 3/1. It's probably going to trade with the creature and Surveil 2. It's fine. It is a 2-drop. You will play it. You will probably be looking for better 2-drops. Card's fine. Wildwood Escort. So if this didn't exile itself, it would be a little bit better. But really, this is a 5 mana 3/3 Gravedigger. You play it when you have good things to pick up. If you don't have good things to pick up, you don't play it. Card's just fine. I like the pride button. All right, so that's gonna do it for this set review. That is all the commons and uncommons really quick. I wanna go over a few of the things that we've learned. So we have all these archetypes. I went through so battles. There are 20 common and uncommon battles, 16 of them are rare and mythic. They have 3 to 6 defense. And I want to go back to this battle scaling problem we looked at before we did this set. So let's imagine hypothetically that your opponent has no board, no cards in hand, and some battles. So if they have a 2 defense, 2/2 battle, 2 defense battle that flips into a 2/2, a 4 defense battle that flips into a 4/4, a 6 defense battle that flips into a 6/6, and an 8 defense battle that flips into an 8/8, and you have 1 shock in hand that deal 2 damage. Well, you'll deal 2 damage to that first battle on their end step and make a 2/2, and then on your next turn, you can attack them or you can attack a battle. If you attack them, then you have them dead in 10 turns. That is 10 attacks for 2 damage each. If you attack a battle, then in 2 turns, you now have a 4/4. So you spent 2 turns to get a 4/4, but now you have 8 power. That's dead in 3 turns. So that already brings the whole clock down to 5 turns. If you attack the 4/4 battle, them with your 2/2 battle, then you're attacking for 6, you have them dead in 4 turns, so that's a total of 6 more turns to kill them. Or you can attack their 6/6 battle, and in 1 turn, double the power you have in play, which means you have lethal in 3 more turns for a total of 5 turns if you attack that 6/6 battle. Well, now you're gonna have to think about things, because you can either send your 6/6 and your 2/2 at their 8/8, and gain an 8/8 from that, or you can send the 6/6 and the 2/2 and the 4/4 just right at them for 12 damage. That's dead in 2 turns. So if your opponent has a blocker or a removal spell, then you're going to start working on that 8/8, because once you have that 8/8, that's 20 power down. You're going to attack them and kill them within 1 turn. So this is a pretty... Figuring out when to attack the battle and when to attack your opponent is going to be key in this format. And that's why I talk so much about the rhythm, because that was the simplest version of turning battles into attacks and counting your turns. But cards aren't the only things affecting the rhythm of this format. All of these incubate tokens, all of these transforming cards, all of the ways to ramp, it's all rhythm. And yes, we learned that from Neon Dynasty. So Neon Dynasty had this rhythm of sagas where you'd play the saga does the thing, and the first thing that the saga tends to do is interact. You bounce a creature, you exile a creature, you put a token into play, then you do something smaller like gain control of all the permanents or drain your opponent 1 or gain 2 life. Then you have a 3/3. Now that 3/3 blocks on that rhythm, and then on turn 4 turns after you played the saga, it attacks. So the rhythm of the saga is on, off, block, attack. The rhythm of the battles is something you have control over. You get to control when that battle flips. You get to control what that battle does and when it attacks, and your opponent is going to be trying to disrupt that rhythm. And incubate tokens have a rhythm, and transform creatures have a rhythm, and equipment and pump spells have a more surprising rhythm. But finding that rhythm is key to playing this set well, and I'm not going to tell you it's easy to find the rhythm, but playing will help, and watching other people play will help, and knowing the cards will help, including the stats. So knowing what tricks your opponents have and what the convoke cards that your opponent could have are going to be really important to figuring out when to play everything. And if that's a concept that interests you, I did talk about it a little bit more at the beginning, which I just uploaded the rest of the set review to YouTube. I don't think you have to watch the whole, so I try to do the set review so like, yes, you can watch it and get everything you need if you watch the whole thing, but I don't want you to have to watch the whole thing. Exactly. That's exactly right, Night Dark. I don't want you to have to watch the whole of this set review to understand what's going on, because it's a long set review and it's a dense set. What I want you to be able to do is open up this set review when you need to know, like when you want to know about a given color, or when you want to know the nuance of a specific card. I want you to be able to find that. But I do recommend everybody who wants to perform well at this set, just watch the first, really just like 10 to 15 minutes where I talk about the mechanics. I did just upload it all to YouTube, and I will be uploading this one tonight, so it'll be available tomorrow. Tomorrow night is Draft Club. It is invitational and it is streamers. And I think, in first. And it's East Draft Club versus West. That's going to be the last one. That's tomorrow at 6:30. I'd love to see some of you there. And then on Thursday, I was invited back to Early Access, and I'm really excited to do Early Access again. I'll be drafting a lot with some pros. I'll test a standard deck and an explorer deck. I'd love to see some of you there. This is finals. Tomorrow is finals. Tomorrow is the finals. But I have the most points, I believe. I'm not positive because once I knew I was locked for the top 8, I kind of just fooled around, figured out what would be fun to play, and I played a lot of weird decks, and I don't regret it at all. All right, who is playing Magic tonight? I am not following enough people playing Magic. Villain J. Oh. Let's go see that Villain J or Asparagus. Oh, let's go see Asparagus. I like Asparagus. I think he was doing a Commander League tonight. I'm really excited tomorrow. Oh, I loved that. I had so much fun, Night Dark. So yeah, stop by tomorrow for the last of Streamer Draft Club, and then Thursday we will be doing Early Access. I'm gonna do at least 8 hours. I'll figure it out from there. But I'd love to see some of you there, and I like to test all the things that I just studied up on, and I hope I can share them with you. If any of you aren't following and you want some notifications, go ahead and give me a follow. I always appreciate that. I'd like to hit 1,000 followers pretty soon, so I do appreciate your support. Everybody, thank you so much for stopping by. I had so much fun doing this set review, even if it was exhausting, because it took me twice as long, literally twice as long as All We Won to parse the cards. So cool. All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and raid my buddy Asparagus. Be sure to show him some love. He does more real Magic. I like explaining it because it's for me too. Like, I get a lot out of doing these